field hearing on the Forgotten Downwinders, amending the Radiation Exposure and Compensation Act to remedy an injustice. And we have a full program here today of witness testimony. We'll be taking public comment at the end of this hearing. For anyone who would like to add anything after what they've heard or if they have personal experiences. Congressman Gosar has personally set this hearing up to bring evidence back to Washington, D.C., to put in the congressional record and to provide to the Judiciary Committee and other committees of jurisdiction. He has brought his staff here today. I would like to introduce them to you, starting with myself. I am Tom Van Flein. I'm his Chief of Staff. To my left is Jeff Small, our Legislative Director. To our right is Leslie, our Scheduler and Staff Assistant. And Trevor, where are you? Trevor Pearson? Oh, there he is in the back. He's a Legislative Assistant. And we have our Business Outreach Development Coordinator here, Stephen Briggs. And with that, Stephen is going to start the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Penny. Our District Director, she's everywhere all the time. Sorry, Penny. So we have a large staff here. After the hearing, you can talk to any one of us or the congressman, depending on how busy he is at the time, and we can take information back to Washington, D.C. or help you with anything. So the congressman always believes it's important to have his staff out in the district meeting with the people. With that, Congressman, if you can gavel. This hearing is now formally started, and we will start with a prayer. Stephen Briggs.
Please bow your heads with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we just come here this morning. Lord, we just want to take the time to open this meeting with a word of prayer and invite you here. Lord, your word says that we will know the truth and that the truth will set us free. And so, God, it is in that pursuit that we gather today, Lord. I pray that you would just bless every person who is going to testify here before this hearing, that you would give them a sound mind, and that you would just take their words, Lord. And, Lord, we pray for the leadership, that the fruits of this hearing would be useful in bringing closure to this issue, Lord. Lord, we just want to recognize all of our men and women in service today and their families. We pray that you would just bless them, that you would give them safety and strength today, Lord. And it is all this we come in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, we will now present the color guard, Mr. Don Olin and Ray Thies.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to have the national anthem sung by Debbie Kaysen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare The bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can join us in one moment of silence for former Prescott Councilman John Hanna Sr., who passed away and was a Downwinder. Thank you. You may be seated. At this point, we will begin the formal proceedings of the hearing with the opening statement by Congressman Paul Gosar, who has filed legislation in the 113th Congress to remedy the Radiation Exposure and Compensation Act to address the very issues that are being brought up here today. And with that, I will turn it over to Congressman Gosar.
Thank you, Tom. If we could take just a quick moment, if you've got your cell phones, if we could put them on vibrate and silence, we'd appreciate it. Well, thank you very, very much, and thanks for having me out here. As you can see, I got a little too much sun yesterday out here, being pasty white from Washington, D.C. But thanks. I would like to thank all the witnesses for taking time out of their schedule today to appear at today's hearing as we analyze an issue of critical importance to Arizonans and so many other citizens throughout the country. As many of you know, from 1945 to 1962, the United States government exposed innocent Americans to cancer-causing ionized radiation from nuclear fallout, which resulted from the commission of nearly 200 atmospheric weapons developmental tests. These tests and the development of these weapons were conducted as part of our nation's Cold War security strategy during an era when other hostile nations were also engaged in nuclear weapons testing and proliferation. While essential to ensuring the protection of our homeland, these tests should have been conducted in a manner that minimized the exposure to citizens to cancer-causing carcinogens to the greatest extent possible. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Though the testing in question was performed in Nevada, radioactive fallout affected people in Utah, Arizona, and potentially throughout the country. Additionally, tens of thousands of workers were engaged in processing and mining uranium that was essential to the proliferation of these weapons. Countless Americans developed serious illnesses in relation to radiation exposure from atmospheric nuclear tests, as well as employment in the uranium industry. Many of these citizens filed class action lawsuits as a result of the pain and suffering caused by these actions, but those were ultimately dismissed in federal court. Congress subsequently provided an apology on behalf of the nation and passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act of 1990, or in other words called RECA, to establish a trust fund for partial restitution to individuals commonly known as downwinders who have contracted certain cancers and other serious diseases that can be attributed to radiation exposure from the nuclear weapons testing. The apology to the downwinders states, "It is the purpose of this act to establish a procedure to make partial restitution to these individuals for the burdens they have borne for the nation as a whole. The Congress apologizes on behalf of the nation to these individuals and their families for the hardships they have endured." While the act which established RECA was well intended, there are some serious flaws that have prevented thousands of Americans from receiving justice and the compensation to which they are entitled. Citizens that reside in counties close to where the testing occurred were excluded from this program for no logical, scientific reason, including people that reside here in Mohave County, Arizona, and those in Clark County, Nevada. Prevailing winds certainly carried evidence of fallout, evidenced by the high number of radiation-related cancers reported in these areas. Additionally, 10,000 of these cancers were associated with the There are particular cancers not covered by the program that were likely caused by the exposure to carcinogens in question. My goal here is to ensure that the affected residents in Mohave County and then in Clark County, Nevada, and other areas not covered that were certainly impacted have a fair shot at justified compensation before the trust fund is closed. These claimants should be subject to the same burden of proof as all other claimants from different areas. For Congress to deny these citizens the right to even file a claim is both inconsistent and careless. It violates both the apology and the promise made by the original act. Congress must keep its promise and it made and enact policies which lend credence to its formal apology. Clearly, the act needs additional reforms as counties covered are arbitrary and not dictated by sound science, and the cancers covered are not comprehensive. I will continue to fight for justice for our friends and families. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses' views on this critical issue. And before we get to testimonies, I would like to start this hearing with a PowerPoint that we have put together to give you some background and additional insights into the important matter that we are discussing today. So if you'll point your attention to the screens and monitors, we will walk through you as far as the PowerPoint. Do we have it up? Okay. This is a slide that outlines the lower Southwest, the California, Nevada, southern Utah, and Arizona. Here it is. And you can see the big question mark where we're looking at where we sit today in Mohave County. The little white area in Nevada is also Clark County, which we will also be trying to work with Congressman in Nevada to get some resolve as well. So you can see what's been included in the green area. But as I recommend everybody, there's additional insights into the PowerPoint, and there's an 11-minute video that is here as a result, and that's quite compelling, so I would hope that everybody takes a look at that. Next one. Is there a video?
Yes.
Okay.
The Nevada test site is a United States Department of Energy reservation located about 65 miles northwest of the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. From 1951 to 1962, the Nevada test site was the primary site used for the testing of nuclear bombs, both surface and above ground testing. 86 tests were performed at or above ground level, all of which released significant amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere, commonly referred to as fallout. This nuclear testing and its accompanying fallout adversely affected the lives of thousands of United States citizens. These people came to be known as the Downwinders. In 1990, the federal government passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. This law apologizes on behalf of the nation to the Downwinders and their families. It also provides monetary compensation to the Downwinders and their eligible survivors. But does it compensate all the people affected by the nuclear testing and its fallout? Here is a map of the area covered by the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, RECA. Here is the Nevada test site. If we are to believe the federal government's version of events, we would have to believe that for the entire 11 years of above-ground testing, all of the fallout somehow magically circumvented southern Mohave County and continued on and landed in the Arizona counties of Coconino, Yavapai, and Gila.
So go to the next slide, please. So these are a couple of the bullet points, and it's no secret that the United States government conducted many nuclear tests in the western United States, as outlined by that video. Let's go to the next one. This is just a snapshot of some of the tests, and actually shows spectators actually watching up close, and many of our troops actually were paraded directly at them. So this gives you some idea about the outline. Next one. I would like to touch on one of the particular series of tests that was particularly controversial, and that's Operation PLUMBBOB. You can actually see it here. There was 29 different test explosions. It was the largest and longest set of test series in the continental United States, and it generated a lot of controversy. It was conducted in Nevada from May through October of 1957. This will give you some outlines in regards to the radiation exposure from PLUMBBOB. along with the current wind technology that we can actually look at wind currents and its spread. It would behoove everybody to kind of look at the green areas on the map. This is the areas that were most affected by the downwind radiation called Operation PLUMBBOB. And you'll notice that Mohave County is once again, as well as Clark County, were the most affected and were excluded. This actually shows you that in some of the cases, we actually had our men and women in troops actually go towards the blast area, exposing them to the same type of issue that now a lot of us understand with increased carcinogenic. They were actually asked to walk straight towards the blast. So you can see some of the issues that we had. You can actually see this mom and little son actually watching the blast from a mushroom cloud. So it's a little bit eerie about what we actually asked people to do, and with the cavalier attitude that we actually showed with this. A lot of this information, they didn't understand what could occur, but still, again, we have to have a government that's accountable. Next picture actually shows that this is one of the ladies that will be here today, Miss Patricia Curran. She's actually showing that she's got snow in her hands. And this was one of the things that they were prohibited, trying to make sure the public did not eat the snow. Just goes to show you the pictures that have come around. As a precursor of some of these slides, I'd like to show you some quick clips of some of the Nevada test explosions to show you just how massive and powerful they were and how easily the radiation could be blown into the wind. So you can see the power that was associated with it and our cavalier attitude in regards to that. This next slide actually shows you the plume and how it actually affects how it actually grows, particularly with prevailing winds. And we have documentation of all the winds, prevailing winds at the time, so you can see how the expansion goes. This actually shows you a pattern of the United States and prevailing winds that were prevalent during that time. And you can see the affected area that we're talking about in southern Clark County and northwestern Mohave County here in Arizona, in that blue circle. This gives you an aspect of the prevailing winds from west to east, a little bit from northwest to southeast. So it gives you some of the inferences to try to build the next picture, which choreographs the blast along with prevailing winds, which now actually shows you the plume. And you can actually see in northwestern Mohave County, you can see that Mohave County is in the dark area here on the plume. This map shows the radioactive fallout measured by county from 1951 to 1970. And once again, you're going to see that Mohave County was exposed to the highest category of radiation. This chart will actually show, was sent to my office by some of the Downwinders, so we'd like to thank them for a lot of their information. As you'll note, that portions of Mohave County are on this list as having the highest radiation exposure not covered under RECA. This basically is RECA. It's called the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, and it was done in 1990. It was originally passed to compensate people known as downwinders who have contracted certain cancers and diseases presumed to be the result of radiation exposure from nuclear weapon testings in Nevada. It was the original definition for affected Arizona areas was very broad, And it was stated that that part of Arizona that is north of the Grand Canyon and west of the Colorado River. And this definition included the northern part of Mohave County, north of the Grand Canyon, but did not include the rest. RECA actually contains the following apology. It's the purpose of this act to establish a procedure to make partial restitution to these individuals for the burdens that they have borne for the nation as a whole, and that Congress apologizes on behalf of the nation to these individuals and their families for the hardships that they have endured. Now, these are the current eligible areas in the green and blue, and you can actually see the downwinder categories, and the overlapping green is also shows you the uranium worker overlap. And these are all the states in the West that actually have those jurisdictions. So you can see it's very Western oriented. RECA was reauthorized in 2000. It was amended to expand eligibility for RECA payments. The definition changed to include specific counties instead of broad definitions. The definition now includes Coconino, Yavapai, Gila, Navajo, and Apache counties, but not Mohave County. And as a result of Mohave County's north of the Grand Canyon remained the only part that was included in RECA. Now, I'm going to take a moment with this slide to kind of address some of the misconceptions about Mojave's exclusion from RECA's coverage originally. One of the things that we have to do is in order to be heard, we have to be based on facts. Until last fall, I was under the impression that the exclusion of Mohave was related to a clerical error, and that seemed to make perfect sense. I had also heard that the rumor that Mohave was misspelled at one point with a J, like Mojave Desert, actually had something to do with it. I wanted to let everyone know that nobody I've spoken with, my staff and other staffs at the Congressional Research Service, have ever found documentation to actually support that theory. The most likely scenarios that we are aware of is that Congress followed a debatable National Cancer Institute study from 1980s, or the exclusion that was the result of politics and are not just by an arbitrary selection process. Now, you've got to just, you have to have lived in this during RECA from 1952 to 1962 and have to have lived at least 2 years in the affected area. So you've got to go through a process here. This basically gives you an outline, and you can read it here real quick like. There for leukemia other than chronic lymphocytic leukemia, there are multiple myeloma, lymphomas other than Hodgkin's disease, and the following primary cancers: thyroid, male or female breast, esophageal, stomach, pharynx, small intestine, pancreas, bile ducts, gallbladder, salivary glands, urinary bladder, brain, colon, ovary, liver, except if cirrhosis or hepatitis B indicated, or lung. And then one of the ones we're also going to be looking at here shortly is prostate cancer, okay, for inclusion. To date, in the history of RECA, more than 39,000 claims have been filed, and as of March 1st, 2013, there are about 26,870 that were approved claims. Once again, these are outdated by about a year, but that's as close as you can get government work to give you some. Forms of cancer, we've kind of going through this. We kind of outlined them for you there. And according to the Department of Health and Human Services, prostate, nasal, cavity, sinus, pharyngeal, and laryngeal, along with pancreatic cancers, may also be associated with radiation exposure. This is one that we want to highlight. Prostate cancer was not eligible under RECA payments, but there are a number of studies now that we're seeing with prostate cancers, particularly in Mohave County and surrounding areas, that show almost a decade further advance on average for prostate cancer to be showing up among men, particularly in the testing sites. This is the bill that we're talking about, the Mohave County Radiation Compensation Act. It's H.R. 424. I will make people aware that we will be changing this bill to include Clark County, Nevada. So it's a by-state modality. It will give us better credibility and actually more authority to disrupt what we call the earmark rule and some of the compensation issues. So that basically will give you some of the other things that we look at. Now, the area we're talking about is for those here, for Mohave County, it's the red. And then for Nevada will be that little white area that's excluded on the southern tip of Nevada. Now, we have tried a number of attempts to try to work this into legislation to include Mohave County in the past. We tried to actually put this on the National Defense Authorization Act just last year. But what it actually would do is it actually would increase spending according to the Congressional Budgetary Office. And therefore, for every increase in spending in that aspect, you have to have another aspect where you're actually cutting. And so from that standpoint, we were not able to have it allowed as an amendment to the NDAA. This spending is also mandatory, so because it's configured in that mandatory spending, and that's how we actually look at it. This is a clip. Here's a clip of me in front of for the NDAA trying to put this amendment forward.
Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking on Gosar Amendment number 50. Sorry, this may take a moment, though. By way of background, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act of 1990, or RECA, established a trust fund to provide compassionate lump sum payments to individuals commonly known as downwinders, who have contracted certain cancers and other serious diseases that are presumably to be the result of the exposure to ionized radiation from above-ground nuclear weapon testing or from various activities in connection with uranium mining. Though the testing in question was performed in Nevada, radioactive elements affected people in Utah and Arizona as well. The original language in the 1990 RECA used a broad definition of the affected areas in Arizona. That language reads, that part of Arizona that is north of the Grand Canyon and west of the Colorado River. That is a definition. That's good enough. So, poor quality of, watch the politician's mouth there. Some of the updates, we've been trying to work with 424. Like I said, we will amend it to try to get a bipartisan and a bi-state modality to help us out here. But what we're doing here today is trying to focus on getting congressional intent to show from all of you the stories that we all share and make it part of the record to highlight that we need to resolve this. Here's some of our friends that have been very good to us in telling their stories. So thank you all. There's many more than just this picture, but just wanted to let you know about that it's about people making solutions, not government doing it. Here's John Hanna, who I had the fortunate aspect of getting to meet and get to know pretty well before his passing last year. Ms. Sherry, his wife, will be actually speaking today as one of the witnesses about her family's pursuit of and being included in the Downwinders. They're from Yavapai County. Ms. Sherry was born over in Winslow, and so that's one of the affected parts of as you saw from the studies. So with that, what we're going to do is go to testimony that we've got. So that's the end of my comments. And you can, this PowerPoint that we presented today, if anybody would like that, just make sure that Penny gets your email address and be happy to send it to you. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. And with that, we are going to call our first witness, Dr. Scott Cismandera. Dr. Cismandera works for the Congressional Research Service. The Congressional Research Service, or the CRS, is a policy advisory service for members of Congress only. It's a branch of the Library of Congress. They've been in business for about 100 years now. And when it comes to policy and legal evaluation, that is where the members of Congress and their staff go, and they provide unbiased, nonpartisan, factual analysis. He flew out here from Washington, D.C. to help us and provide testimony today. So thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Representative Gosar and distinguished guests, my name is Scott Cismandera. I'm an analyst with the Congressional Research Service, and thank you for inviting CRS to testify at this field hearing on the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act and the benefits provided by RECA to downwinders. Since its enactment in 1990, RECA has paid out over $1.9 billion in benefits to downwinders, on-site participants, and uranium workers covered by the Act. The largest group of RECA beneficiaries is the downwinders. To date, over $881 million in benefits has been paid to 17,629 downwinders. Now in its 24th year, RECA remains the subject of ongoing reform efforts and legislation, such as that introduced by Representative Gosar, to include all of Mohave County in the downwinder eligibility area. During the period between 1945 and 1992, the United States conducted 1,054 atomic weapons tests. The majority of these tests were conducted at the Nevada test site. Of the 928 tests conducted at NTS, 828 were underground tests and 100 were atmospheric tests in which the atomic weapons exploded at or above ground level, resulting in radioactive material being released into the atmosphere. Congressional hearings in 1979 led to a report titled The Forgotten Guinea Pigs, which recommended that Congress create a program to compensate downwinders and concluded that, quote, exposure to radioactive fallout emitted during the atmospheric nuclear test operations was, more likely than not, responsible for the serious adverse health effects suffered by the downwind residents. The first legislation to hold the United States liable for damages to downwinders was introduced in 1979, and these efforts culminated in 1990 with the passage of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. RECA was amended in 2000, and this amendment removed the northern portion of Mohave County from the eligibility area for downwinders, necessitating a technical correction in 2002. Today, in addition to providing benefits to on-site participants and uranium workers, RECA pays $50,000 to eligible downwinders. To be eligible for RECA as a downwinder, a person must have one of the types of cancer specified in the law and live in one of the designated eligibility areas. In Arizona, the eligibility areas consist of the counties of Apache, Coconino, Gila, Navajo, and Yavapai, and the northern portion of Mohave County, north of the Grand Canyon. Other areas of Mohave County and Arizona are not part of the downwinder eligibility area. There are two issues facing the current RECA program that are relevant to today's hearing. First, the disparate treatment of Mohave County compared to other counties in the downwinder eligibility area. With the exception of the small part of Clark County, Nevada, included in the downwinder area, Mohave County is the only county that is only partially included in the program. In addition, each of the other downwinder counties in Arizona extends further south than the Grand Canyon or the southern border of Mohave County itself. The second involves the issue of expansion of the downwinder eligibility area. Congress expanded the downwinder area in the 2000 amendments, but there remain calls and legislation to further expand the RECA program. In 2002, Congress mandated that the National Research Council study the scientific evidence related to the health effects of radiation exposure and make several recommendations to Congress, including whether or not the RECA downwinder area should be expanded. The NRC concluded that geography should not be the sole factor in determining RECA eligibility, and that any new RECA cases should be determined based on a probability of causation model. Under this model, each applicant's individual absorbed dose of radiation from atomic weapons tests would be estimated using a process called dose reconstruction and using established radioepidemiological formulas, then used to determine the probability that his or her cancer was caused by exposure to atomic test fallout. This approach would provide greater equity to the program, as any person, regardless of where they lived at the time of testing, could apply for benefits and would make benefits decisions based on the best available science. However, experience with the use of this model in providing benefits to veterans exposed to radiation during atomic weapons testing or while serving in Japan at the end of World War II, and the Energy Employees Occupational Illness Compensation Program Act, or EOCPA, for former atomic weapons industry workers has brought to light the challenges that would be faced if RECA were to use a probability of causation model for downwinders. In addition to the increased administrative complexity and cost and concerns over equity between new applicants and existing beneficiaries, such a model would only be as accurate as the estimated doses of radiation assigned to the applicants. However, accurately estimating or reconstructing how much ionizing radiation a given person may have absorbed into their bodies 50 or 60 years ago, an estimation that, in the case, for example, of radioactive iodine, would be dependent upon behaviors such as milk consumption at the time, would be difficult. And absent accurate dose reconstruction, the model recommended by the NRC will not produce accurate probabilities of causation. For this reason, both the Veterans Disability System and EOCPA have moved away from the probability of causation model and towards a model of presumptive eligibility, such as is currently used for RECA downwinders. This concludes the testimony of CRS. A longer statement for the record has been submitted. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Doctor. And I want to tell you thank you very much for all the help that you've given my staff and then for actually coming out here and helping us with this, program today. I want to go through a couple questions just to highlight some of the facts that you gave us in your testimony. Now, in RECA, in the context, can you explain it versus like the Marshall Islands program, RECA for the veterans again, and also
EOCPA?
EOCPA.
Yeah, well, the Marshall Islands program is a little bit different in that the Marshall Islands is a unique situation. It was part of the U.S. Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands during testing, some of the largest tests and certainly some of the greatest human exposures occurred in the Marshall Islands. Tests at Bikini Atoll, Inuitak, for example, rendered parts of the Marshall Islands uninhabitable to this day. People suffered serious immediate health effects as well as long-term health effects. The Marshall Islands later became independent of the United States. As part of that, the United States, the Marshall Islands has set up a commission, a tribunal to pay benefits. The United States funds that tribunal. So that's a little bit of a different situation. The two that I think are more analogous are REVCA and EOCPA. REVCA is the Radiation Exposed Veterans Compensation Act. As you showed in your PowerPoint, many members of the military participated in atomic weapons testing, and of course others were stationed in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki immediately after the detonation of the atomic weapons there. Initially, those veterans were essentially put into the same pool as all other veterans to apply for disability compensation, but they had difficulty demonstrating that their cancer was caused by their service. Veteran System for Service-Connected Disabilities often looks at things like wounds that occur immediately in war, being shot, or those type of physical injuries. Congress then passed a bill that would have created a system of probability of causation where veterans could apply their dose of radiation that they received. In other words, based on their service record, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency would estimate how much radiation they received. Once you know, or you have an estimate of how much radiation a person received, and you have the cancer, you can then use the established radioepidemiological formulas to come up with a probability. And under the Veterans Program, the probability threshold was set at 50%. If, when you put your dose in and you put your cancer in, you came out with 50% or greater, you receive benefits. However, it proved difficult to determine the dose people received. As you know, Congressman, as a dentist who's worked around x-rays, you can wear a dosimetry monitoring device like a dosimetry badge that you or your staff could then know as precise as possible the amount of radiation that hit their body. The soldiers who you saw in that video, or the soldiers who were in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, didn't wear dosimetry badges. By the way, neither did the downwinders sitting in their house wearing one either. So everything then has to be an estimate. And so Congress felt that the veteran system wasn't working using probability of causation. They went to REVCA, which is a presumed eligibility. If you participate in one of the activities deemed a radiation risk activity at a test site, at a nuclear weapons facility, such as the Savannah River Plant or Oak Ridge, or if you were in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and you have one of the cancers, you get compensation. That's REVCA. EOCPA, you mentioned, is for atomic weapons industry workers. Many of them were private sector workers. Congress created EOCPA in 2000. They had 10 years of RECA to look back on. And one of the things that they wanted to do with EOCPA was make it based more on science and less on presumptive eligibility. And so EOCPA uses, for Part B of EOCPA, there's also a Part E, which is separate, but for Part B of EOCPA, they use a presumptive eligibility model. You apply, your dose is reconstructed or estimated, put into the formula, 50% or greater, you get benefits. But Congress created an out because it knew this was going to be difficult. And the out is called the special exposure cohort, which says certain groups of workers at a certain facility, such as the Nevada test site is one of the facilities, or the Rocky Flats plant in Colorado, for example, is a facility. Certain groups of workers at certain facilities are automatically given benefits if they have one of the listed cancers. And Congress even took it a step further by actually mandating in the law that several sites be included automatically into the special exposure cohort. Currently, sites apply, or groups of workers petition the government, and there's an advisory board that decides whether they get in or not. So I think what we've seen from REVCA, or the transition from the Veterans Program to REVCA, and EOCPA moving towards special exposure cohort, and the data that we were able to pull, for example, on EOCPA, almost 70% of the cases that get accepted now under EOCPA Part B come through the special exposure cohort, not through the probability of causation model. What I think we've seen from that is there are real difficulties in estimating the dose of radiation a person received. If you don't have an accurate dose, then the model does not work. And veterans, we have service records. Atomic weapons industry workers, we have employment records, although they're not great because sometimes of the top secret nature of the work, and some of the companies have long since gone out of business. Downwinders, we don't have the records. They were living their lives. They weren't monitoring these type of things. And so our analysis is it would be even more difficult to go to a probability of causation model for downwinders. So that's a long answer to the question.
But to highlight that, the geographic aspect in which constructing our bill and future modifications would be the most beneficial aspect, in your opinion, would it not?
Yes, it would be the most beneficial, and it would be the most consistent with the way RECA operates now, which is if you're in the geographical area for the set period of time, you receive benefits. That goes against what was recommended in the NRC report, but the NRC report, in our analysis, doesn't address these very, very real challenges of determining radiation dose. You have alluded to a little bit in the PowerPoint. Some of the maps are based on fallout and absorbed doses of iodine-131. Iodine-131 is a radioactive form of iodine that is often transmitted to humans through contaminated milk and then causes thyroid cancer. The National Cancer Institute took over 10 years to determine a model of iodine-131 exposure for every single county in the United States. And for counties in the Southwest, they broke the counties up into smaller regions. Based on population, age, wind patterns, radiation monitoring stations, of which there were never more than 100 for the whole country at any given time, so those are very rough estimates, and estimates of milk consumption, whether it was cow's milk or goat's milk, whether it was farm fresh milk versus store-bought milk. 10 years to come up with the model. That is very rough, the I-131 estimated dose. I-131 is only one isotope. There could be up to 200 radioactive isotopes as the result of a nuclear detonation. Now, many of them are not going to affect human health, or they're so short-lived that they wouldn't get to human beings. But other major ones, including strontium-90, which is the same chemical composition as calcium and then affects the bones, cause bone cancer, cesium-137, which affects soft tissue. We don't have the estimated doses at the county level that we do for I-131. If you're going to have this model that NRC recommends, you're going to have to do all that preparation work. It took them 10 years to do I-131. You know, we wouldn't know how long it would take them, but, you know, it would be obviously very complex just to get the rough estimates to start the model. So what your bill does and what all of the other RECA bills that have been over the years, and there have been other states, as you know, included, they essentially take the geographical approach, which counters what the NRC recommended, but as I said, you know, our analysis is there's some real challenges that the NRC doesn't address with probability of causation.
Now, when we're amending RECA, do you think it's impossible to amend RECA, in your opinion? I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, we have gone through a lot in our short term in Congress, but it shouldn't be impossible. Would you agree with that?
I would say after 8 years, Congressional Research Service, nothing's impossible in Congress. Nothing's possible or impossible. I think that's entirely up to, you know, the politics and how these things work. But, you know, the bill has been amended before.
Right.
Other bills have been amended. The program was created. There was a long period of time when Downwinders had no recourse at all.
Right.
They couldn't go to court. Congress actually passed the Warner Amendment, which prohibited suing the contractors after the courts had already said you couldn't sue the federal government. I'm sure there were a lot of Downwinders who thought it was impossible that there would ever be RECA, but in 1990 RECA came out. So you know, it's hard to say what's possible and impossible.
So the common denominator to me is persistence and storyline.
Might be persistence. You know, that may be what it takes. You know, it's hard to say.
I'm going to end. I know you're not an expert in regards to budgetary situations, but when we made the amendment to the NDAA, can you discuss why that was ruled out of order and why that was not going forward?
Well, and I had worked with your staff on that amendment. There are, as you know, very complex rules regarding spending, and it's often frustrating, I think, for the public who says, well, government spending is government spending. But when it comes to Congress and it comes to the Congressional Budget Office, which is a separate agency from the Congressional Research Service, they have very strict rules regarding mandatory spending versus discretionary spending. RECA is mandatory spending. What that means is, regardless of how many people apply and receive benefits in a given year, they're all going to get the money. Right. There's no cap. It's not subject to Congress deciding we're going to cut the program, cut spending on 1 year. It's not subject to things like budget sequestration, which we had to deal with. Increases in mandatory spending, it was determined, in order to be in order, would have to have a corresponding decrease in mandatory spending. And, you know, my understanding when working with your staff, as well as other CRS analysts that worked with your staff on this, was that just we're not able to find that corresponding decrease that would satisfy the committee sufficiently to have the amendment included.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. There's lots of issues we got with CBO and, you know, static versus dynamic scoring and stuff like that. But you highlighted very, very well in regards to some of the problems that we have. So I appreciate it. You're coming out here. I think the people here are beneficial from the study and the continued service that you give us. So thank you very, very much, and we allow you to step down.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next witness is Laura Taylor. Laura is an attorney in Prescott, Arizona, graduate of ASU Law School. Don't hold that against her. And,
Don went to school at U of A.
She is a specialist in RECA claims and has handled more RECA claims than anybody in the world. I think that would be fair to say. So, Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Congressman Gosar, citizens of Mohave County, colleagues and friends, thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important hearing. I am Laura Taylor, and I own a law firm in Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona. For the past 11 years, I have committed a large portion of my practice to the processing of radiation exposure compensation claims, including claims for downwinders, on-site participants, and uranium workers. I have represented over 2,500 clients, and I have filed more than 1,500 claims since 2003. I am one of only a handful of attorneys who actively practice in this area, and because of the number of claims that I have filed, I consider myself an expert. I first met with the Mohave County Downwinders in 2004. I attended several meetings that year, and I was asked to give a presentation to those in attendance on how to file a downwinder claim. The citizens of Mohave County were so hopeful that their county would be soon included in the RECA that they wanted to be educated on how to get a claim approved. How sad it is that 10 years have passed since then, and Mohave County is still not one of the covered counties under the program. There are a lot of things that I know about the RECA. I know how to get a claim approved as quickly and efficiently as possible. I know how to manage difficult clients with difficult claims. I even know some interesting ways to get claims approved that might otherwise be impossible. And I know that many of my clients will die before I get a chance to finish their claim. Unfortunately, there is also a lot that I do not know. The most difficult aspect of my job is telling a client that I do not know why the county in which they live is not included in the program. It is equally as difficult to tell a client that I do not know why certain cancers and diseases are included in the program and others are not. I do not know why the drafters of the RECA thought that part of one county should be covered, but the rest of the counties should not. Radiation does not pick and choose where it lands. There are 2 counties included in the RECA that are only partially covered: the county in which the test site is located and the Arizona county located most closely to the test site, Mohave County. I do not know why the entire county of Mohave was not included in the program. Many would like to blame it on a spelling error, and perhaps that is truly the reason, but I tend to think that the bill drafters in Washington must be incredibly intelligent in order to create the laws of our country. I cannot fathom that a simple spelling error could have excluded part of Mohave County, but not all of it. I simply do not know the reason for this injustice. But I do know that every person in this room has been touched by the aftermath of the government's choice to test nuclear weapons. I know that almost anyone who has lived in Mohave County for any length of time either knows someone that's battled cancer or someone has lost their life to cancer. I have heard the stories of many in this room about their family members who they cared for during their illnesses and whom they lost far too soon to cancer. Some of the folks in this room can remember being dragged out to the playground to watch the testing. Some of the folks in this room remember the bomb parties that were so popular during the time, and how the entire season during which we tested nuclear bombs was a festive season, a time to celebrate the advances of our country the country was making in order to protect its citizens. It is no longer a celebration. It is a devastating and immeasurable loss to tens of thousands of people. The amount of money for a downwinder will never be able to compensate for the loss of a family member, but it can certainly help with medical bills and other expenses associated with cancer. It can help make a difficult time a little less difficult. It is my hope that there will come a day when Mohave County residents can celebrate again, and this time because a wrong has been made right. I so appreciate the efforts of Congressman Gosar in advocating to pass this much-needed legislation. It has been far too long that the citizens of Mohave County have been overlooked. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Taylor. I'm going to highlight a couple points of reference in my questions, just because a lot of people focus on the questions and answers. So to highlight, do you believe the geography that was outlined in RECA was based on sound science or based on politics?
Well, you indicated it was probably based on politics, so I'm going to go with politics.
Doesn't go with sound science, I would get. And from your professional experience from adjudicating claims, because you're seeing it from the ground level, do you believe that Mohave County and probably Clark County should be involved in the process of RECA?
Absolutely. I can't imagine why One part of Clark County is covered, and it's the little surrounding communities of Las Vegas, but not Las Vegas proper. That doesn't make any sense to me. With Mohave County, we've got the northernmost strip being covered, but not the rest of the county. There's no justification for it. I don't know why it happened, but it needs to be fixed.
Gotcha. And in your experience, I mean, you're seeing this once again from ground level. What are some of the most common occurring cancers that you actually see?
We see quite a bit of breast cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer. Those are probably the top 3 that we see in our office. But we've probably done a claim for every type of cancer. Probably the least common that we've done is male breast cancer. I've probably only done 2 claims for that. But overall, I think the cancers that are covered are all something we see through our office on a fairly regular basis. We do get a lot of calls about prostate cancer, and it's very sad to tell someone you don't qualify because you have prostate cancer.
Well, you walked right into my next question. So do you feel from your experience, from what you've seen, once again, based on the science and the adjudication of RECA, that maybe prostate cancer or other aspects should be expanded?
I do. I was asked this question when your staff called me a few weeks ago about the injustices of the program. And I am not a doctor. Dr. Sismondera perhaps could speak more intelligently on why some cancers are included and not others. But again, it doesn't make any sense to me that we have prostate's not covered, but other male-type cancers are covered. Same with female-type cancers. We have uterine cancer that's covered, but cervical cancer is not. So there are certain things that are inexplainable to me about the program.
And from your experience, would there be other steps that you think should be utilized from seeing it in progression over the years, that we should be looking at this type of fallout and exposure in our adjudication of RECA or any other exposure type of aspect?
Well, looking at it over the course of the years, there's been different amendments that have been submitted by different congressmen to modify the program, to change certain aspects of it. I think, in my opinion, right now, the most important thing about changing this program would be to include Mohave County and, of course, Clark County as well. And I'm not sure that answered your question directly, but it needs to be modified. Now, the RECA amendments of 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, those have been submitted year after year, and nothing has happened with those amendments. So I don't know what you can do to help that, but separating out Mohave County certainly would help get this county included.
Well, I think the previous doctor also highlighted some of the probable causation models, but I think science has always got to be reviewed, and I think it's a mandatory aspect. I'm a sunset clause type of a person, and in some of that, I think what we need to do is look at application in current technology and current scientific evidence, and how does it help and explain cause and effects to the constituency that are exposed. So that one may be something that I would suggest. But being in office for 2 terms now, I see how slow the federal government actually works. Do you have a couple stories that you would like to highlight? I mean, I would expect you to omit their names, but to highlight for the record, that if you can give us kind of a synopsis of the stories that you're hearing and that people endure because of this process and program.
Probably the first claim that I processed was by far the most interesting claim. I had an elderly gentleman come into my office and he wanted to file a claim on his wife, and it's really what got me into the program because I wasn't familiar with the program back in 2003. But he had lost his wife to cancer. He didn't read English, he didn't write English, and he just wanted somebody to help him. So I took this claim on thinking, well, I can fill out this paperwork, this shouldn't be too difficult. But he didn't tell me a lot of things about his family, including that he had never married his wife. So that threw quite a roadblock into the claim right away. So I had to refile on behalf of the children, and there were 4 children, 2 minors, and I also had one of the boys that was serving in the military overseas. So I had to work with these minors and a gentleman that lived out of the country to try to coordinate getting information from them, and it was extremely difficult. The claim took 5 years to process. And during that 5 years, I started doing other claims and found out, they're not going to all be like this. Some of them are much easier. But that's probably one of my favorites. He came back to me and ended up filing another claim on one of his parents. So, and that's generally what happens in my practice. I'll see somebody come in, I file a claim for them, they come back with a claim on perhaps another family member or themselves.
I think a lot of people ask the question, it's hard to know what's actually out there. And are there some groups that you would highlight, like the Downwinders here in Mohave? They're very active. Are there some groups or some websites that you know of that might be something that somebody can research? I mean, the internet is a nice tool to help us out.
There aren't too many organized groups like Mohave County. There's a group out in New Mexico that's organized. And there was a small group in Las Vegas for a while, and I don't know if they still exist. But there is a website that a man by the name of Preston Truman out of Idaho has put together, and he peruses the news, I think, daily, looking for anything that might be related to nuclear testing or downwinders. And he publishes on his website a list of what's out there, and that's probably the best resource for downwinders.
Well, Ms. Taylor, thank you so very, very much for your testimony today and answering the questions, and thanks for the expertise that you lend to the credibility of our hearing today.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next, we have a statement from Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick. She could not be here, but she fully supports the Congressman's efforts here, and she submitted a longer statement for the record. I'm going to read portions of it so you can hear what Congresswoman Kirkpatrick has to say about this. So I'll be reading in the first person, but I am not her. My name is Ann Kirkpatrick, and I represent Arizona's 1st Congressional District. This large district encompasses over 58,000 square miles and has large swaths that have been included in the geographic designation for coverage under RECA. Before I get into the details of why this act should be amended to include additional geographic areas, I want to thank Congressman Gosar and also Congressman Franks for their efforts to seek justice for Arizonans, including members of the Wallaby tribe who were harmed as a result of the nuclear test programs conducted in the 1950s and 1960s. I would also like to thank all of the folks living in our communities who have been active in this fight for decades. I appreciate the opportunity to provide this testimony, and I further appreciate hearings like this that allow the public to provide input and see and hear what we do in Congress. Since the sick and injured have had no legal redress against the federal government, Congress enacted RECA to create a program that would provide partial restitution to these individuals who developed illnesses after radiation exposure. There were 2 types of exposure that were recognized: the radiation released during the atmospheric nuclear tests, or the downwinders, and those who were impacted by employment in the uranium industry. My district has suffered long-term consequences as a result of the downwind exposure to radiation. The residents of the Four Corners region, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, have filed the majority of RECA claims, according to the Department of Justice. It took an amendment to RECA to add the areas north of the Grand Canyon, including Page and sections of the Navajo Reservation, since these areas were initially wrongfully excluded from the act. Excuse me. The amendments were incomplete, however, and we are now in a situation where people who live in one side of a county line are geographically included, and people who live on the other side of the line are excluded, yet there is no scientific basis for drawing this imaginary line. Large swaths of Mohave County in Arizona and Clark County in Nevada are excluded under RECA, even though radiation-related cancers in Mohave County are the 2nd highest in the state, and the prevailing winds from the nuclear test site head southeast toward the very parts of Mohave County now excluded. Looking at the map, and this was the map that Congressman Gosar had on the PowerPoint earlier, this one. So she's referring to this map. Looking at the map, it is apparent that the downwinder division line is arbitrary. Counties in Nevada that are directly northwest of Mohave County are included appropriately, but areas immediately southeast are excluded, notwithstanding the well-known fact that the prevailing winds are southeast. In other words, if radiation plumes and materials extended northwest of Mohave County, as we know they did, it is a certainty that these materials also landed in Mohave County due south and east as they traveled with the prevailing winds. We further know this by simply looking at the pattern in Gila and Yavapai counties that are included and shaded in green. but the areas of Mohave County, shaded in yellow, immediately adjacent that are excluded, but are within the same wind pattern. This makes no sense. I therefore support amending RECA to include those portions of Mohave County that were excluded, and by so doing, I hope we can allow some justice for those people who have lost loved ones or are themselves suffering from radiation exposure illnesses. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide my testimony, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, Arizona's 1st Congressional District. So that is the Congresswoman's testimony. And next up, we have Sherry Farrington will be reading a statement from Congressman Trent Franks. Sherry?
Congressman Gosar and those assembled here, thank you for the opportunity to represent Congressman Franks. My name is Sherry Farrington. I am the field representative for Congressman Trent Franks, and I want to read his statement here. As a result, and of course some of these facts will be repetitive. As a result of nuclear weapons tests that were conducted between January of 1952 and July of 1962, many Arizona communities, primarily those downwind from the nuclear tests, were exposed to radiation that in some cases caused cancer and other serious diseases. In 1990, Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, RECA, to provide for payment to individuals who contracted serious conditions as a result of exposures to these tests. In 2000, RECA was amended, and yet more areas were made eligible for compensation. Unfortunately, at neither time was Mohave County, Arizona deemed an eligible area, despite the fact that hundreds of Mohave County residents were affected by these weapons tests, a conclusion that was also reached by the National Research Council and the National Academy of Sciences. Since coming to Congress in 2003, I have worked diligently to ensure equal coverage under RECA of those Mohave County residents regrettably affected by nuclear weapons tests. I hope we will finally be able to ensure the compassionate compensation of every person affected by these weapons tests, including those in Mohave County who have, to this point, been unjustifiably excluded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Farrington, and thank you to Congressman Franks for his work with Congressman Gosar on this. Our next witness is Mohave County Supervisor for District 3, Buster Johnson. Buster is an Army veteran and a retired sheriff's deputy, very active here in the community. He's been very helpful to Congressman Gosar, and his office frequently comes to Washington, D.C., and assists us on various land use and natural resource issues, and he's been a big help with us on the Downwinder issue as well, so welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Honorable Congressman and staff, I want to thank you for taking the time to hold the field hearing to address the concerns facing Mohave County and those affected by the fallout of the federal government's nuclear testing done at the Nevada test site in Nye County between 1952 and 1963. I am Buster Johnson. I've represented Mohave County's 3rd District since elected in 1996. During my time in office, I have seen the southern half of Mohave County repeatedly left out of the federal government's Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Counties farther east have been included, yet Mohave County, which is the closest county in Arizona to the former Nevada test site, has been excluded. It is inconceivable and unconscionable that a victim and resident of the southern portion of Mohave County is denied recognition or compensation. In a 2010 study done by the Arizona Department of Health Services, Mohave County ranked 9% higher than the rest of the counties in Arizona for cancer-related deaths, and 37% higher for lung cancer specifically. The studies and statistics are there that prove that individuals in Mohave County have been affected far more than any of the other counties in Arizona from the nuclear fallout. Mohave County residents and victims were exposed to 129 atmospheric tests, or a total of 986 kilotrons of radiation from the Nevada test site. That's equivalent to 986,000 tons of TNT. This amount is 50 times more than the radiation that was released with either of the bombs dropped on Japan during World War II. Atmospheric tests conducted by the Centers for Disease Control have shown that nuclear fallout from the over 129 above-ground nuclear tests has spread and affected residents across the United States, some as far east is the Atlantic Ocean. Throughout my years in office, I have heard numerous testimonies from Kingman residents about being able to see the mushroom clouds emitted from the bombs right in their own backyards. If nuclear fallout can affect counties further east and south than us, I find it unbelievable that Mohave County residents are still denied compensation today. As District 3 Supervisor, I worry about the effects of the nuclear fallout had on the area that I represent. At the time of testing, Lake Havasu City was unpopulated, and I am sure no one has ever thought to conduct tests on the soil and water in and around Lake Havasu. The long-term effects of those living in Mohave County could be far worse than any of us imagine. The federal government has an obligation to take up responsibility for this problem and clean it up. They are putting the health of thousands of American citizens in danger. This also is not the first time that Mohave County has suffered due to the negligence of the federal government. The United States Atomic Energy Commission, created after World War II to regulate uranium mining, failed to inform the Navajo Reservation's uranium mining workers about the dangers, and also failed to regulate the mining to minimize contamination. Due to their negligence, many now have a negative viewpoint when it comes to uranium mining, which has resulted in Mohave County losing out on over $30 billion in economic development. The federal government must take responsibility for their actions, which is why I'm urging Congress to approve and pass H.R. 424, which would make all affected residents of Mohave County eligible for radiation exposure. I want to thank you, Congressman. I appreciate you allowing me to address you.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson, and thanks for that testimony. Now, for the record, I want to cite, you cited this 2010 study done by the Arizona Department of Health Services that revealed that Mohave County ranked 9% higher than the rest of the counties in Arizona for cancer-related deaths, and 37% higher for lung cancer specifically. Do you believe that the current Downwinder division lines are arbitrary?
Most certainly I do, yes, sir.
Now, how long have you been working on this issue?
But since I took office, it's been brought to the forefront since then.
And is this an issue that keeps reappearing on agenda items and issues that are concerned to Mohave County folks?
Yes, the Downwinders have been a group that have been pretty much ignored in Mohave County since I came in. I mean, they formed, they bring their issues forth, and nothing's. Congressman Franks, before you, when the district is his, worked on it the whole time he was here, and hopefully with your HR bill, this will maybe finally get some attention that these people desperately need.
Now, when we see the cancers that are covered, particularly in the reproductive areas, do you find any other reason why, or any reason why we shouldn't see prostate cancer being included in this study?
Now, I pretty much believe that all cancer should be looked at because, as we all know, radiation affects people differently, and I think that should be another thing that should be looked at.
Do you have a couple stories that you would highlight for us to kind of give us a typical comments that you get from folks here in Mohave County as well as anywhere else? Do you have a couple stories you'd like to share with us?
Well, the only one, I mean, there's a lot of people that come forward with their stories, and some you've already heard, but I know we have employees working for Mohave County now whose parents are affected by this, who are going through treatment at this time, and their quality of life has really been diminished, along with some of their parents obviously already having passed away.
Well, I certainly appreciate your testimony and your due diligence. Thanks for helping us out. And the other thing I want to say is thank you very much for having a nice leg room behind here. I mean, we don't have this in Congress, so it makes it kind of nice not to have cramps. So thank you very, very much.
Don't get used to my chair.
Thanks, Buster.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next witness is Mr. Gary Watson. He is a supervisor for Mohave County District 2. He grew up here in Kingman and has operated a family business here for many years. He's a former councilman and vice mayor for the city of Kingman. Please welcome Mr. Watson.
Thank you. Congressman Gosar, members of your staff, members of the public, today, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on the downwind radiation exposure. Thank you so much for coming. As the local elected official for the Downwinders, I'd like to thank Congressman Gosar for his legislative initiatives on behalf of these folks. These continued efforts to help Mohave County to be recognized in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA, are outstanding, and by far are the most productive of any elected official in Congress to date. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'd like to introduce myself, of course, Gary Watson, Mohave County Supervisor, District 1. Now, the reason why District 1 is important is because at that time, Mohave County District 1 was predominantly the most populated area of Mohave County. I can clearly recall the repeated warnings of don't eat the snow in the mountains, be careful not to drink the water from the springs or the small water sources. The school officials, our parents, knew the potential effects of the radioactive fallout from the Nevada test site, even in the 1950s. In reviewing notes and articles preparing for this testimony, I came across information about the disparate effect of radiation on female downwinders that really struck home. I'd like to share a few excerpts from that today. The most prominent long-term health risk associated with exposure to ionizing radiation as a result of the nuclear fallout is an increased risk in leukemia, thyroid cancer, and other solid tumor cancers. According to a report by the National Cancer Institute, the relationship between radiation exposure and subsequent cancer risk is considered best understood and certainly the most highly quantified dose-response relationship of any common environmental human carcinogen. Recent studies conducted by the National Research Council and the Environmental Protection Agency have estimated that radiation causes cancer development in women at a rate that is 52 to 58% higher than in men. The likely source of this heightened risk radiation-induced cancer is higher radiosensitivity in certain organs in women, such as the breast, the lung, thyroid, and ovaries. Women are also more likely to die from cancer associated with radiation exposure. According to the Environmental Protection Agency's federal guideline report number 13, published in 1999, women have a 48% higher chance of dying from cancer than men. This finding is supported by the National Research Council's Committee to Assess Human Risk from Radiation to Low Levels of Ionizing Radiation, reviewed and released in 2006. This report found that the risk of fatal cancer to females exceeds that of males by 37.5%. This information deepens my resolve to fight for the folks of Mohave County. Inclusion into the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in its geographic entirety, as many of our loved ones have died from cancer caused by the radiation. Family and friends, and now it seems our mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters, are 50% more likely to develop cancer than men. Linda Long, LaDonna Wilson, Judy Mae Garman, Marion Watson, Sharon Davis, Celia Morton, Linda Love, members of my family, very close friends, all ladies of great presence. Other friends we've lost: Jim Lewis, Dick Brown, Lawson Bradley, Dick Grounds, Ralph Molinax. Mohave County has been recognized by the Department of Health Services as the state's highest number of cancer-related deaths. It's time to pass H.R. 424 or fundamentally alter the RECA program so that those that are affected can be eligible for the compensation. Congressman Gosar, thank you so much.
You're certainly welcome, Supervisor Watson. I've got a couple things to highlight in your testimony. It's important to state. Federal experts estimate that radiation causes cancer development in women 52 to 58% higher than men. Does this statistic reflect what you've seen here in living in Mohave County?
It does, precisely.
Now, you stated that the most common results from radiation exposure are leukemia, thyroid cancer, and other solid tumor cancers. Does this information that reflect what you've also seen in Mohave County?
Yes, it does, and reminds me of the people that died directly from it: LaDonna Mae Watson, Dick Grounds. You can correlate directly with those cancers to those people. It's so flagrant in Mohave County that it's just unbelievable.
Do you find it strange that Mohave County has the highest cancer rates in the state, and yet it's excluded from RECA?
It's probably the strangest thing that I've tried to attempt to understand from our Congress in years.
Now, are there anything else, any other causations that you could relate to in Mohave County living here your life that actually could be implied as causation to explain why we see such a high cancer rate?
I can't think of any other cause that would be any more of a causation than the radiation exposure.
Now,
I was
you
here
mentioned-
and I can remember seeing the clouds, the mushroom clouds, and of course don't eat the snow and stay away from the small water resources. Remember it clearly, vividly.
Now, you mentioned you grew up in Mohave County during the testing years and that your parents and school officials were aware of possible radiation effects. How did they learn about these potential effects?
You know, I'm not sure how they learned directly, other than maybe just some common sense. They could see those mushroom clouds not that far away, and although the science and information at that time was a little bit cloudy, I guess common sense just kind of told them to be careful.
Were they ever warned by government officials about the consequences or the exposure?
I can never recall any official government communique to that effect.
Is there any evidence of potential radioactive fallout in Mohave County when you were a child? Why we shouldn't have Mohave County included inside the RECA jurisdiction?
I cannot believe of any reason why we should not be included.
Well, Supervisor Watson, thank you so very, very much. Hopefully we can get it over the hurdles and we can make sure that this becomes a government accountable to the people, for the people, and by the people in regards to its actions. So thank you.
Congressman Gosar, thank you very much. And you might want to wear a hat to stay out of the sun.
Yeah, I got a little too much time.
Thank you, Supervisor. Our next witness is Matthew Compilation. Matthew is a native of Kingman. He is the grandson of Dr. Arnold, who many of you know and are familiar with his work. He's the former assistant director for the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and he is the vice chairman of the Mohave County Downwinders. He is primarily focusing his testimony here today on a report that was authored by the state by Aubrey Godwin. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Van Flein, Congressman Gosar, members of your staff. I wish to personally extend my profound thanks to you and the excellence and effectiveness of you and your staff. It's some of the best I've seen in my career. Again, my name is Matthew Compilation. I'm a Kingman native. And the reason I wanted to mention that I am the grandson of Dr. Arnold, prior to access and public health, counties in Arizona designated a county doctor. And my grandfather was the county doctor from 1946 until his retirement in 1976, basically during the entire period of the nuclear testing, and treated many of the cases, cancer cases, here in Mohave County during that period, much to his confounded efforts. We'll give you one example, which unfortunately you'll see many people testify on cancers they've had, but you'll hear from very few that survived leukemia. Childhood leukemia cases normally occur in a population, if I recall correctly, of children alone. There's one case in about 180,000 children. He treated more than 40 cases here in Mohave County alone, with the county population during that time being roughly 5,000 in total. They weren't ever able to accurately gauge the number of children during that time. We don't have those facts currently. Subsequently, I, later on in my career, had the fortunate aspect of working for the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. And approximately 10 years ago, in 2004, 2005, the Downwinders approached me and other members of state government, Senator Linda Bender, Governor Napolitano, et cetera, and some hearings and efforts were developed. And I worked with the director of the Arizona Radiation Regulatory Agency, Aubrey Godwin, and we developed a report both for the legislature and for Governor Napolitano, of which both the legislature and the governor's office conveyed that information and data that Director Godwin had put together to convey to Congress. And I'm going to summarize and paraphrase a memo that Director Godwin had put together, and unfortunately he wants to convey his regards. He was unable to attend today, but I will be speaking on his behalf. Again, this is a memo from March of 2005, but he had stated that the only thing he would change in the memo today, with the exception of maybe some of the additional data, is the date, because it still resonates today. So this, again, was a memo that was conveyed both to the legislature and the governor's office at that time. Transmitted herewith is a copy of the report of the current situation in Mohave County regarding radiation exposure and compensation payments by the federal government. You'll note in this report that the lower portion of Mohave County is not eligible for these payments, even though the persons living in the area were exposed to higher levels of radioactive iodine than the persons living in Gila County and other regional counties that do currently receive compensation payments. Thus, he respectively suggests that copies of the report be made available to the entire Arizona congressional delegation, the U.S. Senate, as well as the entire U.S. Congress, and also to the Arizona legislature. In addition, he suggests that copies be made available to every official within the state of Arizona, the National Academy of Science, and the U.S. Attorney General's office, who oversees the administration of the RECA program. Also submitted in the report is additional information are the attendance registration lists and information provided by the Downwinders of Mohave County. In view of the concerns of the local citizens, he respectfully requests and encourages the passage of a memoriam by the Arizona legislature requesting Congress to authorize and amend RECA to include all of Mohave County. And several individuals expressed concern that such testing at this time, 10 years ago, may have been reinstituted, and there's some additional information that we don't think is pertinent to this hearing today that is also included. But his report really surmises very, very accurately with the data that he was able to compile in a very concise manner, really all the necessary information that justifies the inclusion of Mohave County into the RECA program. And from a personal standpoint, again, growing up here, I saw many of my friends, even in their youth, that were affected by cancers, as well as their parents and families, and many of them are here today. And we grew up just believing that cancer being throughout the community in so many different forms, and people being affected by different forms of cancer that are unrelated in the same person, we just viewed that as normal. We thought this was occurring everywhere else. And as I matured and left Mohave County, I found that it was not the case, that these exceptional cancer cases and high rates of cancer were unique to this community. And with that, we appreciate your efforts to rectify and provide justice to the people here in Mohave County that have been affected over these so many years.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. compilBOB, and thank you very much, and I appreciate your comments in regards to the Arizona Radiation Regulatory report commissioned by Aubrey Goodwin. I want to go back to that report and reference it. And in that report, Director Godwin states, there is inequitable treatment for Mohave citizens that were exposed to the weapons testing fallout. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Absolutely, in keeping with the information that he was able to compile.
Now, the report states that the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission attempted to limit testing to weather periods that would not carry the fallout cloud into other states. Is that a correct statement?
That is, there actually was a policy at the testing site, so the fallout would not affect the West Coast, that they would wait for westerly winds so the winds would blow towards the east to the less populated areas of northern Arizona and southern Utah. That was a testing site policy.
So they had some idea that there was problems associated with this fallout.
Yes, they not only had idea, they had evidence to that effect, stemming from where they saw the radiation fallout patterns in Japan and in the Marshall Islands.
So now, were they it shows at least some success in regards to their dictation of when these plumes or when these detonations would go off. Is that true?
That is true.
Does the report state that the government had knowledge that the fallout would likely have consequences? I mean, you talked about that earlier, but is there anything within the report that shows that there were some consequences based upon of what they knew?
Yes. From the elevated cancer case and exposures, they were able to determine that there would be consequences, but they were basically triaging or trying to lessen the impact by impacting this population rather than the greater population areas on the West Coast.
So definitely they inherit a responsibility.
Yes, sir.
Now, do you believe the federal government did everything in their power to minimize the exposure of citizens to cancer-causing carcinogens?
I think, well, again, I wish not to speculate, but as per the evidence that is provided, I don't think that they did.
I mean, we saw the pictures. I mean, they clearly knew what they were doing as regards to fallout. You just talked about it and highlighted it.
Yes.
But we saw from the pictures they hardly, gave out public health comments and telling people to stay inside, not to eat the snow. I mean, my mom even taught me not to eat yellow snow.
Yeah. Right. Well, yes, sir, and pardon me if I misspoke, but yes, I do believe that they were well aware of their impacts.
Well, I thank you very, very much for that background, and thank you very much for the comment, and thanks for being engaged and continuing your support for the Downwinders. Thank you, Mr. McCall.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our next witness is Pastor Danny Briles. If you could please come to the podium. Welcome, sir.
I bring my wife up here because she's a beautiful part of me. And Congressman, I'm sorry for your sunburn, but you did notice the prevailing wind today. I thank you for allowing me to testify, and I will not be redundant on certain aspects of renaming what the RECA is or anything like that, but it's hard for a pastor to get up and have 5 minutes to speak, but Michael did a good job on editing my statement. My family moved to Page, Arizona in Coconino County during the time of the building of the dam. We lived there from the 1960s to the 1963, and so we were during that time of period that they were doing the nuclear testing. I attended elementary school there, and I have verification of that, which I have already sent to the office. Your office sent me back the judicial form to apply for Downwinders. Of course, there's no place for the kind of cancer that I contracted. We moved here to Kingman 51 years ago, 1963, another one that has been affected by Downwinders. Now, I want to share my experience with RECA. During the summer of 2013, my family doctor noticed a spike in my prostate-specific antigen level, known as PSA. He recommended that I go and see a urologist specialist, and after an appointment with the specialist, he recommended that I have a biopsy. On July 24, 2013, I received the diagnosis that I had prostate cancer, and it was his opinion that I should have the prostate removed as soon as possible because of the aggressive nature of the cancer. On October 23, 2013, I underwent surgery for the complete removal of the prostate. I now have scheduled an appointment in May to follow up with a PSA test to ensure that the cancer has not spread. The tragedy of the situation is that all three of my brothers have been diagnosed with some form of cancer. My half-brother on my mother's side, John, who is now 70, was diagnosed with prostate cancer at 59. My full brother, Lauren, age 65, recently died of lung cancer. My younger brother, Robert, age 59, was diagnosed with prostate cancer in his mid-50s, which has now metastasized to bone cancer. In addition to my prostate cancer, I had basal cell carcinoma skin cancer removed approximately 8 to 10 years ago. There is an extremely limited history of cancer in my family. My father had 16 siblings, and only my uncle contracted prostate cancer and died in his 80s, much later in life than the diagnosis my brothers and I received. And the only commonality that we have as brothers in regards to cancer is that we lived in Page from 1960 through 1963 when they were doing the testing, and then moved to Kingman. Both areas have been susceptible to have been areas exposed to downwind radiation exposure. The only warning we have ever received as children was not to eat the snow. I don't know if you've ever been to Page, but there's a lot of sand there. And we as children played in the sand all the time, making forts and doing activities which children will do. And it is appalling, the disproportionate number of victims of cancer that I grew up with here in Kingman as well in Page. Most with breast and lung cancers, some which metastasized from other regions of the body, parts which were not covered under RECA. It is my opinion all of Mohave County should be included in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. I also believe prostate cancer should be covered, especially since all the other parts of the urinary tract are covered. It is evident that these exclusions were either a mistake or resulted from pure political decisions. They are not based on science. In high school, a fellow student of mine died of leukemia while he was in high school. And through the years, several of my other classmates have died from various forms of cancer. And as a pastor, I've had the unfortunate duty of conducting several funerals of different friends who have succumbed to the tragedy of cancer, and they all grew up in Kingman. One friend had prostate cancer which metastasized to his brain and did not receive compensation from RECA. The government has not fully protected us. I am still a fairly young man, even at 62. I am currently incontinent and impotent and cannot fully enjoy the wife of my youth of almost 43 years. A part of me was robbed when the United States government failed to protect me from an enemy that was not foreign, but was domestic. These actions are contrary to all we treasure and value here in these great United States of America. I have a number of names of individuals that have succumbed to cancer over the years, both from Page and Kingman, and I submit the list to you to be entered into the record. And Congressman, I thank you for the opportunity to testify. If you have any further questions, I'd be glad to answer them now or at a further day. And I just pray God's blessing upon you and our leaders and the United States of America.
Well, thank you, Pastor Browse and Mrs. Browse. Thanks for doing this as teamwork. I know the feeling. You and two of your brothers were diagnosed with prostate cancer before the age of 59, correct?
Yes.
The statistics show what age is the typical prostate average age?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Gotcha. John Hopkins, you're exactly right. John Hopkins, one of the medical articles that we've reviewed showed that the average would be around 69, so you're about right. You stated in your testimony that cancer does not run in your family. Is that true?
That is true.
And that your father's 16 siblings, only one died from cancer.
That is true.
And that was very late in life, true?
True.
You testified that the only common modality is that you and your brothers shared was living in Page from 1960 to 1963.
That is correct, sir.
And that's during the time of this RECA inclusion, true?
True.
52 to 62? Do you believe that the radiation exposure from the nuclear test done in Nevada by the government caused the cancers now prevalent within your family?
Yes, I do.
Now, over the years, you've lost countless family and friends and classmates to various cancers, many of which were caused by radiation exposure from nuclear tests done by the government. Would you say they're abnormally high here in Mohave County and up in Page?
Correct, sir.
This would be higher than the rest of the country?
I believe so.
Now, you touched on your testimony, but could you briefly elaborate on some of the pains and sufferings associated from you, your friends, and classmates of the implication of this cancer?
Just the sadness of watching them succumb to cancer, to see that there's nothing that they could do about it, and especially those that could receive no compensation, because cancer is very expensive anyway, and many insurances did not cover, or they did not have coverage. And it's just a tragedy as a pastor to see the pain and suffering that went on within the family.
And one last question. Would you agree that we have to look, over time in regards to new technology and different cancers that could be included within this profile? Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. I agree to the point that forensic science has advanced so much to show things, and people have been released from prison showing things that have happened, and also the effect upon this. I was reading the different reports, and some of the reports in 1955, unless you were right at the test site, chance of getting cancer, nil. And then our government later in testimony said that there was a great disservice to the individuals. And I was just a young little boy. I didn't know what my future held. I don't know if it's metastasized to the rest of my body. I won't find out until next month. And so I believe that with new science, they're going to find that this has affected more than just certain cancers.
Well, I thank you very much for having the courage to come up forward and speak, and the power of two is noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next witness is the chairwoman for the Hualapai tribe, Sherry Counts. The Hualapai tribe was established in 1883 by executive order. Its reservation runs along the Grand Canyon and encompasses approximately 1 million acres. The tribe and the tribal land has been in the direct path of the downwind, and she is here to provide testimony on behalf of the tribe. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Congressman Gosar for arranging this meeting. It's very important to the Hualapai people. Thank you on behalf of the Hualapai tribe. I'd like to express my gratitude to Congressman Gosar and his office for organizing the field hearing and for giving us a voice in Washington, D.C. This is an important hearing today that seeks to bring justice to thousands of people who were senselessly harmed by radiation exposure from nuclear testing and conducted by the federal government. As tribal, county, and congressional leaders, we need to make sure that the testimony heard here today doesn't gather just dust on the shelf on Capitol Hill. This is why I am here today. This isn't just about my people. This is about the entire region. This is about doing what is right. As chairwoman of the Hualapai tribe, I have seen too many family members, friends, and tribal members that have suffered from multiple forms of inexplicable cancers. In fact, dozens and dozens of Hualapai members have suffered and passed away early in their lives due to the exposure from the nuclear testing that took place in Nevada in the 1950s and the 1960s. Many people I talked with are surprised and saddened to learn that the federal government likely knew of the dangers associated with iodized radiation fallout from surrounding populations. While the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission had a policy of trying to limit testing to ideal conditions, they were not completely successful. And nuclear tests were commissioned when the westerly winds were blowing directly to the Hualapai Reservation. The Hualapai people paid dearly for this shameful neglect by the federal government. The nuclear testing has not only impacted Hualapai people at the time, but it has left an unfortunate legacy even today. Generations of Hualapai people now pass down genetically damaged cancer-causing cells to the children as a result of the exposure. As Native Americans, we have been subjected to many forms of injustice, yet sadly, these days are not behind us. We still endure an injustice by being prohibited from seeking benefits through the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, despite our people being exposed to and dying from the effects of nuclear weapons testing. We know that this area, Mohave County, has an abnormally high rate of radiation-induced cancers. We know that the people of this region were exposed to repeated ground nuclear tests. We know the link is there. Mohave County has been tracking radiation illnesses. According to the county, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Mohave County has a very high, unusually high cancer rate involving the kinds of cancer related to radiation exposure, especially lung cancer. The U.S. Census found that the Mohave County 65 and older population has a lung cancer rate that is almost twice that of both the state and the nation. Mohave County has the second highest radiation-related cancer rate in Arizona, and its cancer death rate is 37% higher than the state average. There is no reason to exclude any of the people from Mohave County. My people have suffered the effects of radiation exposure, and all of us deserve to be treated fairly, equally, and with dignity, like all the other people. It is my sincere hope, Congressman, that your colleagues in Washington have the courage to pass your legislation, House Resolution 424, so that we may deliver justice to those who have paid for the mistakes of the past. It's never too late to right or wrong. You know, when we're standing here doing the Pledge of Allegiance, it says injustice for all, and that includes everyone that lives in the United States of America. You know, when I looked at the map, it's really surprising how it could be overlooked in such a close range from the test sites. So, once again, Congressman Gosar, we commend your efforts to correct this injustice, and we thank you for working to include the Wallapai people within the program. Thank you.
Chairwoman, thank you so very, very much. Now, the Wallapai, I mean, for those that will be seeing this, don't know where the Wallapai Reservation is, right? I mean, it's very, very close to here, right?
Mm-hmm. It's 50 miles up the road. It's on the Grand Canyon. We own the 1 million acres there, and it's called Peach Springs, Arizona. The I-40 bypassed us on Route 66.
So you're about 15 miles away from the Nevada border, are you not?
Yes.
Now, do you have any personal recollection of the nuclear weapon tests as they were happening?
Not personally, I was young, but I do remember someone telling me they used to stand up on the hill, one of the hills, and watch the plume from Peach Springs.
Now, did the government ever warn you of the consequences of these tests? You know what, I really don't know that because I was young, so I didn't know that. One thing, though, that really struck me is that my uncle used to take me rabbit hunting with him, and all of a sudden he stopped, and then we were told through our family, you know, not to eat the rabbits anymore. So nobody eats rabbits anymore. And that's even to today.
Yes, my mom used to really make a really good rabbit, cook a rabbit. It was so awesome. Anyway, that was from me. I'd throw that in.
It's close to lunchtime.
I know.
Now, are cancer-related illnesses that you've heard about today, how have they impacted the tribe?
Well, it's very significant. I have a family, my friends, one of our former chairmen died of cancer. His daughter and son died of cancer. The boy and the daughter were my best friends. I went to visit my friend, his name is Chuck, in Flagstaff, and on a Tuesday, and the next weekend he was gone from the cancer. His sister lived for 2 years, and she just died in 2012. You know, and this is really sad because these are people my age. You know, these are people that I hung out with when I was young, and you know, so it really hit home when the cancer struck. The wife had cancer, but she's in remission right now. You know, so this whole family has been impacted by cancer. Recently, last year, One of my other friends, schoolmates, she had got cancer and was diagnosed with cancer, and she lived 3 months, and she was gone. We have 3 people that have survived cancer. 2 of them are currently, well, one is an elder. She just found out she's in the hospital right now. Also, another employee of ours is currently doing chemotherapy for cancer. So, it has a significant impact when, these people that I know that are close to me, that I grew up with, have cancer. All of a sudden, it's becoming broader and bigger.
Now, are you aware of any tribal members who have successfully submitted claims to the review process and been awarded compensation?
No, I'm not. I do not know that. I don't know that we do that because we're not, in that part of the area to be able to do claims.
Now, do you believe that other tribes should be included, that you're aware of, should be included under the RECA process as well?
Yes, I do.
Could you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, those tribes that are close to us, that really are impacted by cancer, the Yavapai County, all the county, and Arizona actually, according to the map, needs to be a part of this. I'm sure they're all impacted. Supai, Havasupai live down in the canyon. So I don't know their statistics, so I can't speak for them.
Well, I thank you very much. One of the things that we actually submitted just 2 weeks ago is our Native American Tribal Treaty Review Commission. And I hope that this would be one of the areas that we would review, and that's compensatory and overview with the tribes. So thank you so very, very much, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness is Miss Patricia Curran. She was born in Prescott, Arizona. She's a special education teacher at Prescott High School, and she's here to document her family and personal history as it relates to the Downwinder issue. So welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry, my voice is bad, but this has been going on since I was born. I would like to thank Congressman Gosar, for holding this forum today. Thank you. And I'd like to thank the participants and everyone else that are here. My name is Patricia Curran. I was born in Prescott, Arizona, September 28, 1951. Nine months and 1 day from the first atomic blast. I was raised in Prescott for much of my life and is now a special education teacher. But I believe that I do have a Downwinder syndrome. After receiving compensation for the radiation exposure program in September 2010, for both my parents' death, I tried to wrap my mind around the fact that decisions made by the government in Washington, D.C. during the 50s and the 60s caused the pain and suffering of my family that we all had to endure. All that my brother and I have left were once the fond memories of playing innocently outside daily with our friends, climbing rocks, kicking the dirt, in the summers and in the winters, playing in the snow. We consumed the local meat and drank the fresh milk. These were wonderful memories that I hung on to, the ones that help us face complicated world of adulthood, and for me, have now come to a horrifying end. My father was a courageous World War II veteran who later got a job digging ditches in Prescott and eventually became the conductor of Santa Fe Railroad, hauling the dangerous uranium ore in open containers. He died after years of suffering from multiple diseases. While my father was away on the rails, my mom suffered a miscarriage. I remember running to the drugstore, getting her medication, and shortly after, she was whisked away to the hospital. Neither one of us knew what happened, and we were too young to make phone calls, and we were left alone. She was a non-smoker, but succumbed to lung cancer that spread rapidly, and she died in only 9 days after diagnosis. Ironically, she was a wing spar inspector for the Boeing Aircraft Company during World War II for the B-29 fleet of planes. I sometimes wonder if there was radiation exposure in that line of work as well. My brother developed very soft teeth, which Congressman Gosar probably has learned about over the years, and now wonders what he has in store for his medical future. Personally, I have contended with deformities, altered DNA, and compromised immune system that has plagued me with multiple chronic infections and compromised my my work. And it works. My body works way overtime. It's opposite of most people. So my body attacks its own cells, and it's pretty rare. But it has to do with connective tissue disease. I've struggled to have the health necessary to be a contributing, functioning member of society. Because of my degenerating health, I'm unable to continue my duties as a special education teacher. Growing up in the weather in Prescott allowed us to be outside almost all the time. We ran free with our imaginations in the woods. I also remember becoming violently ill with measles and quarantine at home, chronically ill with tonsillitis and adenoids, which obstructed my airways and were oversized almost to over the size of an adult. I had ear infections and series of low-grade fevers since I was born. I also remember from my childhood the carefree days of playing on the swing set, observing nature, and dressing paper towels with my best friend, who incidentally has almost the same issues I do. We live next door. And like many children, I ate the snow that fell to the ground when I was a child. Only in this area we didn't know that it was contaminated. What I remember most about playing in the snow, I was eating it like a snow cone. I would pretend they were flavored with cherry and grape. In reality, they were flavored with fallout. Since moving back to Prescott in 2011, I've discovered more and more people have lost loved ones and friends to terrible cancers. There are also many I have met who have acute chronic illnesses and those who have birth deformities or abnormalities. Many of these people are unable to work because of these issues. I've also learned that there are others like me who are crying out for help for answers. To limit these types of diseases covered under RECA is irresponsible. Each individual reacts differently to radiation exposure. Some of the people have suffered, others have not. Arbitrarily awarding damages to some of the forms of cancer and not others is inappropriate. Furthermore, the current geographic boundaries for eligibility does not seem fair based on science. This is when I heard Congressman Gosar was holding a Prescott Valley Town Hall meeting on September 24th. I went to ask him how he could help us persuade Congress to consider legislation in widening the areas, increasing the compensation, and adding types of diseases that are not covered. I asked Congressman Gosar a rhetoric question. You may remember this. What do I tell my friends who are sick and dying? We agreed to tell them to hang in there. The problem is that there's not that much time left. The people who are suffering and dying need help now. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Curran, and you're exactly right. That's why we're having this, is to exemplify exactly why communities need to stick together and highlight the inadequacies of RECA. So now, your parents you actually were fulfilled by the RECA statute in regards to their deaths, true?
Correct, yes.
Now, do you believe that you and yourself have endured health problems related to the exposure by these atomic blasts?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you believe, what's your opinion in the application of the RECA laws and identifying those who suffer from the complications of nuclear fallout? Do you feel that they're adequate?
No.
And how so? Could you be a little more specific? I know you did in your testimony, but I want to make sure they're concise for the record.
Just by talking to friends, one of my best friends who was a physician, her father was a physician in Prescott, and he also worked in Mohave County, and he died of prostate cancer. And she and I both commiserate on our oddities and the amount of money we spend. I spend $700 a month for autoimmune shot that I get, which is not a basic kind of treatment. It's very progressive kind of a treatment, but it has been helping me a lot. But I tried to go back to work after retiring on disability, and after 10 months, I have to quit. So the shot helps, but it's just really weird. Like, my thumbs are deformed. I had a tooth that was, actually, they called it a double baby tooth. And when it came out, they thought that I would have an extra tooth, and it had grown together and fused. And the dentists were watching it. So it's just really weird things happen, and they happen acutely, where I end up in the emergency room for a cold that nobody, well, people wouldn't get over until they were, like a week. And for me, I'm like in the emergency room. So it's really weird. But
So how would you rate the federal government's application of RECA standards to the people, from geographic to caps to inclusion of other problems? How would you rate it?
about a 20%, if that. I just don't rate it well at all. I think it's a great idea, but it wasn't well thought out, and why Mohave got cut off, I have no idea, and I don't think it's fair. It's just not.
Well, you've shared your history with pictorials, not only for your testimony, but also in our PowerPoint. So thank you very much for doing that. And I know that cancer can also be caused by consumption of milk and water products. Do you recall the federal government giving you warnings in regards to milk products, water, snow, or did it come from physicians?
We did not get any warning, but what I do recall is a brown bottle that my mom, this is my brother over here, that my mom gave us, and she would crush it up with 2 spoons in jelly, and it was a little white pill, and I happened to go on the internet, and I found out it had something to do with keeping from getting thyroid cancer. So I do remember her squishing it up and forcing us to get it. I do remember my mom dressing us up as children, and it was a great event. We went to look at models of atomic shelters. So, and I remember the jets flying over our house and being afraid of hearing it. So for some reason, as a little child, I remember those kinds of key things that most children don't remember.
Gotcha. Now, to finish up, I've made a point that we should be looking back at legislation to make sure that we're encompassing current technology and scientific basis, as well as being respondent, looking back at the data of how we serve people and accountability. Would you agree with that assessment, that that's got to be a continual effort?
Yes, and I think more people need to know, not just Mohave County, not just Arizona, but I think other people need to know as well, so that they can, well, it doesn't give them anything to look forward to, but that they can kind of get themselves in order, their lives in order for the end.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story and the pictures. They're great pictures. Thank you so very much.
If you need me for anything else, just let me know. I'm not working now, so thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We have 2 more witnesses, and then we'll be taking a short break, and then we will have public testimony after the break for those of you who would like to speak. And also, we want to thank those people who are tuning in on the internet, and Mohave County is kind enough to live stream this. There have been about 40 to 50 people, I understand, watching online as well as you hear, so there's more interest than just what you see here. Our next witness is Mr. Douglas Chipman. If you can please come forward. He has lived in Yavapai County. He's a Navy veteran, an engineer in Prescott Valley, and a successful RECA claimant. And he wanted to share some information with everybody here about his experience with it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Congressman Gosar, for allowing me to testify here today. My name is Douglas Chipman. I'd like to explain how the years spanning 1946 to 1962 have forever changed my life. I was born in Denver, Colorado, June 22nd, 1939. My family and I moved to Prescott, Arizona in 1946, where I completed grade school through high school. During the high school, I worked in the Eagle Drug Store as a stock boy for my father. He was a pharmacist, and he knew all the local ranchers, so he stuck me out on a ranch during the summertime. to work as a ranch hand. After school, I went into the Navy, graduated as a sonar school technician, and spent most of my life at sea from 1958 to 1962 on the USS Ullman, DD 687. During and after, or during my time in the Navy and even afterwards, I was a ballroom dance instructor, loved to dance, and I was also a weightlifter. It helps at lifting those. I have worked with weights up until the cancer, and then the cancers put a halt to that. After the Navy, I spent 2 years in Northern Arizona University at Flagstaff, Arizona, at pre-engineering. Later, I attended night school at Phoenix Junior College, getting an associated arts degree in business and background in psychology. Then for 10 years, I worked in Phoenix for Mountain Bell Telephone and Telegraph Company, and 20 years as a private engineering consultant. I retired in 2001 and returned back to Yavapai County, specifically Prescott Valley. Now I would like to share my horrific experience with you. I had symptoms for 1 year of cancer, but the test showed no cancer. Then the VA facility had a urologist come in, do a biopsy, and found a tumor. I went to Phoenix VA Urology Department. They treated me with catheter injections of tuberculosis virus, chemo, and chemical chemo. At the first operation, they removed 80% of my bladder wall. It was all cancerous. After 3 years of treatment and more operations, my cancer mutated, breached the cancer wall, and with 2 large tumors. My VA surgeon told me he couldn't help me anymore and transferred me to Mayo Clinic. At that time, I was terminally ill. At Mayo Clinic, I was tested, poked, scanned, and prodded. And then I was told they couldn't operate on me because I had cancer in my blood. And they could get rid of the tumors, but the cancer in my blood would go to my brain, my lungs, and my bone marrow. I would have to go through special chemo treatments to try to rid myself of the cancer cells. I told them to use me as a test subject. Any experimental procedures that they have there, hit me with them. I had nothing to lose. The chemo treatments worked, but were extremely painful and took a toll on my health. They got rid of the lymphoma. Then I was informed they would have to use robotic surgery on me. January 27, 2009, the cancer caused removal of my complete urinary tract, bladder, prostate, and half my lymph nodes. But the operation was a success. What happened to me, or what qualified me for this treatment, was I did not smoke, did not drink beverage, had a good outlook on life, and was in good condition. They had to remove these organs, place them in a plastic bag inside my body, seal the bag to confine the cancer cells, and then they had to seal the bag and remove it from my body. The mutated cancer cells were so active, they couldn't be subjected to operating room. When I awoke from surgery, I had a new bladder, but it was on the outside, and that's what I wanted to see what the fuss was about. Now I had a urostomy pouch that has to be changed every 5 days. Next, January 21st, 2009, I was rushed to Mayo Clinic, emergency room, and was admitted for pulmonary embolism that was critical. I had lymph nodes that wouldn't turn off. That took another specialist from Johns Hopkins and new procedures to work. It worked. Then I had to have surgery for cancer on my face, and I'm constantly fighting skin cancers. I have learned that cancer has a mind of its own. Under the right conditions, for instance, being subjected to atomic radiation fallout, its favorite fuel source, it adapts to its desired expansion. I filed a compensation under RECA and was accepted payment January 7th, 2011. At that time, I didn't know about the medical problems that I would encounter from my cancer procedures. The atomic fallout and the resulting radiation exposure from being downwind of weapons testing was life-changing for all in its path. The pain for patients and their families is unforgettable. Congressman Gosar, thank you again for letting me speak to you today and tell you about my experience.
It's our pleasure, Mr. Chipman. Now, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing good. As a cancer patient, you always have the cancer now.
Yeah.
So you are always sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop. But, you can't think about it. You go on with your life. You make the best. I can't do the physical things. Nobody told me about it when I got my operation, not to lift anything, and I did, and it gave me a hernia that now I can't lift anything. I have to wear a special belt. But I'm alive, I'm well, and happy of it.
Well, you still got a smile on your face, so it's near and dear to this dentist's heart, so thank you. Now, how are you dealing financially with the ramifications of your treatments?
The very first thing, when I got my $50,000, I had to go down because the cancer treatment didn't take my hair out. All my teeth turned black and fell out. So the first thing I did was take $3,000 to go down and get myself a new set of teeth. And so thank you for the $50,000 there. It's the whole procedure. Things I used to be able to do, now I have to hire somebody to do. And that, I didn't realize what my abilities were worth around the house and helping friends until I had to start paying for them. And it adds up to a lot of money. And when you're on Social Security with a small retirement income, every little thing that goes out counts.
Yeah. Now, when you went through the RECA discovery to try to get compensation, how was your experience? Was it long? Was it arduous? How was that process?
It was exhausting. I did it all myself. So I went on the website, got all the information, and then I contacted RECA. They worked with me real well.
Did they?
They helped me, but I had to get all of my school records from grade school up through high school to prove that I was here during that time. A lot of personal information. I had to get all the medical records of my operation from Mayo Clinic. And that deck was about that thick, that they wanted to make sure that I did have cancer and the surgery was there and the procedures were there. But it took about a year.
Wow. I mean, I'm going to suspend the rules for just 1 second. Ms. Taylor, is this gentleman an exception to the rule in application, or is he pretty much the standard of the rule? Yes.
You don't need an attorney to file a claim, I'll
I
just say
know.
that. But for those that choose to do it on their own, my understanding is that it can be more difficult. A year is probably pretty average for a non-represented client. We know how to get things through more quickly, so we're able to do that. It's also important to note that the DOJ is about 6 months behind in processing right now. One claims processor has over 400 claims on her desk right now.
Wow. Now, Mr. Chipman, as far as the compensation amount of $50,000, do you feel it is adequate?
Well, I had also filed with the Department of Labor because I had worked at the atomic test site.
Okay.
And the procedure that you have to go through there, unbelievable. You have to have dosimeter records while you were there. Well, they don't always follow the rules. And a lot of times I went on the site, I was not going out where the tests were being conducted. They didn't give me a dosimeter because I was working on some of the buildings in there. Well, unfortunately, at one time when I was working on some of the buildings, I had one of my people out on the test site, and he had troubles, and I had to go out and help him. They didn't seem to be concerned. When I talked to them about it, they said, oh yeah, we have records at this, but you have to have from your previous employer for the research and everything. My previous employer has been sold 3 times. I contacted, no records. And then they do the workup that the one gentleman said to do a breakdown, 3 years. That's the fastest they could get it done. And he said, if you qualify for the RECA, take it. Well, theirs starts out at $100,000 and varies from $100,000 to $150,000 if you're accepted. I don't see what the difference is if we get radiation through the Department of Labor for working on the site, or get radiation off the site from the fall. You get more fallout off the site than you do on the site.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when we were discussing the application of RECA, do you agree that some of the arbitrary aspects from what you've seen today are arbitrary and not scientifically based by excluding Mohave County and those of
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I understand air currents. You watch the Weather Channel, you can see the air currents flow through there, right down through here. I think it had to have been political. That's the only thing I can think. And as far as the different types of cancer, I'm an example of what happens when you get bladder cancer and it mutates. It does whatever it wants to do. And once cancer gets into your body, it's cancer. It can hit your prostate, it can hit my bladder cancer, wiped out my prostate, my lymph nodes. It was going up my tubes to my kidneys. It was going down my urinary tract. It just goes wherever it wants to. Bladder cancer is not bladder cancer, it's cancer. And this is what's got me so upset over all of the little tiny bits and areas that it'll cover. That's wrong. I've got friends that have cancer of the nervous system. All different types of cancers. All it accepts is just the bladder cancer,
So you would agree with one of our previous witnesses that, how it affects individuals is very different from one to the next. Number two is that we ought to be dynamic in looking at the application of this law to people based on the best available science. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing your story with us, Mr. Chipman. I certainly appreciate it. I'm very humbled that you showed up today to give that testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. We have, in addition to our witness testimony today, superintendent, or the mine superintendent, Joe Hart. Is he here? There he is. If you could come forward, please. He's going to share with us some information. He, of course, is a fourth-generation Arizonan, has lived in Kingman his entire life, married to his wife, Rhonda, for 43 years, and a former State House representative. And thank you for joining us.
With all due respect, Congressman, I would rather not talk to you. I'd rather talk about you. I want these people to know the kind of man you are and what you stand for and the abilities that you have. I've got to know the Congressman quite a bit in the last couple of years. I spent a lot of time with him. He cares about us. He knows what we're going through. He's heard everybody talk about it for years. Well, folks, there's the cavalry right there. You know, in the movie, when the cavalry comes in, everybody cheers. Right here's the general. I like to refer to him as a pit bull. He is a pit bull with an attitude. And we're going to be the benefactors of his attitude. Thank you so much for what you do, and we appreciate everything you have done for us in the past, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Joe, thank you very much. It's all about teamwork. We're all part of the team, and I think when we get on that kind of pathway, we get things done.
Amen. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. Our final witness to testify today is Ms. Sherry Hanna. Please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say to Congressman Gosar and the members of his staff, all the witnesses here, and members of the public that are in attendance, I want to thank you for having me here today and to share my story. And I have to say that it's just heartbreaking to hear everyone's story as they come up here. I'm grateful that Congressman Gosar and his staff understand how important the Downwinders issue is to so many people out west. And I also want to thank you, Congressman, for your moment of silence for my husband, John. Truly appreciate that. First off, I want everyone to understand that I'm not affiliated with the Downwinders government program, other than I have had two personal experiences with losing people who have been very close to me, my father, and then most recently, my 59-year-old husband. In 1983, my father, Ken Wayman, passed away at 60 with cancer of the esophagus. At that time, we had no idea that his sickness and ultimate death could be linked to any kind of outside forces, such as atomic testing. When he was diagnosed with cancer, it took an emotional and financial toll on my family. As a business owner, it was very difficult for him to work and made it very hard on my mother to run the business and take care of him. Financially, the cost of treatment was a huge burden on my family, from which my mother never really recovered. In 1990, the government passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, better known as RECA. My family had no idea what this act was until my sister learned of it. We did the research, and it was determined that my father was a potential victim of the downward radiation exposure stemming from nuclear weapons testing in Nevada. After filing paperwork and working diligently to get everything done, we were awarded the compensation through RECA. Further research showed that my siblings and I, along with countless others who had been or have lived in the affected areas, were also qualified as downwinders. Although concerned about the impact of the atomic testing, I did not really give much thought to how it could affect me or many other baby boomers when we reached our 40s and 50s. I had not seen much information about the atomic testing and RECA, and anything that was available was not easily accessible. In April of 2012, my husband of 36 years, John, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Having been raised in northern Arizona during the years that the atomic testing took place, we immediately suspected that his cancer was associated with the Downwinders radiation exposure. After a year and a half of battling this horrible sickness, he passed away in October of 2013 due to complications from cancer. As a result, it has been my mission to try and spread awareness to anyone who might be affected. People should know about the Downwinders and their plight. They should also know about the federal program with free screenings that are available and the associated compensation if you are diagnosed with any of the qualifying diseases. Though the compensation involved with RECA is helpful to those fighting cancer and to their families, it is only a drop in the bucket to what you will pay, both emotionally and financially, fighting this sickness. Speaking financially, through my husband's cancer, he has left me facing outstanding medical bills that top $156,000. This is after paying out the $50,000 from what we received from the program, and I have been lucky. My insurance has picked up a huge portion on top of the $156,000. I speak to local groups and on local radios to raise those issues in Northwest Arizona. But in my endeavor to spread awareness about this issue and the RECA program, I have been surprised to learn that there are so many people that I grew up with or that live in the areas who have never been exposed to any of this information at all. It has been difficult for me to find concrete statistics on how many people may have been affected by the downwind radiation exposure from the Nevada nuclear test sites. But it is important for everyone to understand that if you or a loved one have lived or worked in the affected areas between January 1951 and October 1958, or from June 30th, 1962 to July 31st, 1962, for 2 consecutive years, you should go for these screenings. These screenings are not foolproof, but early detection is one of your best defenses in fighting this sickness. I continue to research this issue because the more I learn, the more I can do to spread awareness and help others. I encourage my fellow citizens here today to do the same. I again want to thank Representative Gosar for working so hard to be a part of the solution to this difficult problem. Thank you.
Ms. Sherry, in your testimony, you highlighted something near and dear to my heart, and that is prevention for downwinders. Can you highlight that again for us?
Yes, the government has provided a grant for people who were exposed, and meet the qualifications for the screenings. And the North Country Healthcare in Flagstaff is where I go, and there's several of them throughout northern Arizona that take appointments for the downwinders people. And it's an hour-long screening. They do chest x-ray, blood work where they look for cancer markers. They do urine sample, fetal sample, and then they go over a questionnaire with you, and it gets you in the system as being a downwinder. And then there's no charge to you. If you do have insurance, they take your insurance information, but the government grant pays for it. And then you go once a year for the rest of your life. You're entitled to go to get the free screening. And they notify you, just like your doctor or dentist does. They send you a card saying it's been a year since your last screening and for you to make your appointment to come back. So I think that's, pretty much be proactive and just listen to your body, since if you are a downwinder, you are susceptible to the cancers.
So you also highlighted a key of early detection. So the key for diagnosis is getting early detection. Do you agree with that, Sherry?
I do. I think that's your best defense. Mm-hmm.
Now, how do most of the people that you're familiar with actually find out about these screenings?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, there's so many people that don't know about the screenings, and I would like to see a nationwide push in advertising and some type of program nationwide that lets people know out there. A lot of people that grew up in the affected areas have moved away. They don't know about the program, and if they could hear about these screenings and say, oh, I was raised during that time in the affected areas, I better get in and get help. And I think some type of nationwide program needs to be done to let people know about the screenings.
Now, you highlighted that you lived in the affected area your whole life. Now, how has that affected you, and can you tell us how many people that you know of? I know you highlighted your father and your husband, but can you give us a highlight of other people that you know of that were affected by these fallout experiments?
Well, I have several classmates of mine. There's 3 of them to date that I know of that were in my class, 4 in the previous class ahead of me that were in John's class that have passed away that were affiliated with the Downwinders. So other than that, it's been kind of difficult for me to find out actually how many people that were exposed and diagnosed with one of the Downwinder cancers and then passed away. I don't know what the percentage of it is. It's been difficult for me to find out that information.
Gotcha. Now, you highlighted the cost of care, exceeding over $150,000. Is the present cap at $50,000, is it the same kind of real dollars that today that we authorized by Congress back in the 1992?
No, but when you're fighting this disease, it's very, very, a lot of things aren't covered under your insurance, so they're out of pocket, travel time, and then when everything's said and done, your insurance goes back, and like I'm finding out now, they're sending me monthly bills saying, this wasn't covered, you're not going to be under compensation for this, so this will be what you owe for this, and I'm still in the process of finding out every day, every month when I get my statement what's been covered and what hasn't and what I'm going to continue to owe.
I know that's one of my other vices is insurance reform, to understand when you buy something that what you actually get, comparing apples to apples and not to apples to tangerines. Can you highlight, I know you touched on it real briefly, not just the financial, but the emotional distress by losing a father so early and then a husband so early?
It is. It's emotionally devastating to know that through no fault of their own, being raised in a certain area is associated with something that's caused their death. And it's just frustrating when the cancer, and many people know that have been through this, it just ravages you. And in the case of my husband, he went through the bone marrow transplant, and the transplant failed, and his immune system was down from the treatment, and he contracted an infection, which overtook him. I mean, he had no immune system, so there was nothing they could do, and that is just devastating when they tell you that.
Well, I really want to tell you, thank you for your stalwartness, the way you get the message out, coming over here. I feel blessed to know you and your husband. What a contagious smile. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, at this point, that concludes the formal testimony for the hearing. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then when we resume, anybody here who would like to comment or share anything with the Congressman about the Downwinder issue here in Kingman or Mohave County or any of the counties that are affected, feel free to stay and do so. We'll have 2 minutes of testimony per person, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. All right, we'll be resuming in 1 minute.
He said, way to make a depressing subject actually enjoyable.
So I'm going to have to go.
Oh.
Because I got other stuff. I wanted to share with you a question, and I posted on Twitter because I know you got it. Take this person. I'm sure my letter said I wanted to ask him if the soil and the water's been tested here. I don't know if I get a chance or not. I've been sick for 5 years here. I'm not from here.
Let's stay and ask that.
If I get a chance, that's what I want.
Yeah, the chance is coming right now. Okay. Yeah, please stay. Okay.
How are you? Really appreciate seeing accountability. Essentially, what we're talking about here is evolution.
Michael, you should know by now. We're not your average Republican.
I know. I'm on my.
Hi. Yes, hi. Leslie Fody, nice to meet you.
Oh, good.
I'm a
Leslie's going to
scheduler.
work
You're a
hard.
scheduler?
Leslie will work so hard that you don't win. You know that. Her job depends on.
I'm making have to get another hip replacement.
No, well, you know,
I'll be right back.
if I should win, you still have a job. You're a fellow employee, you're not also.
Yes, it's true. Well, thank you for that offer.
Well, it's not really what I'm arguing.
Keep the House of Representatives. Right.
Really,
I'm sure he would say the same, but that's why we live in this country.
speaks well of me. I'm kind of surprised. Sometimes I'm willing to be like the guerrilla warfare mom.
Right.
David and Goliath, of course. Except instead of me being outmatched by like 10 to 1.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
That's my concern here.
We have this here over at fly all the way out here. I know. Modern. Chance to go to like have students, anything. I don't know if you've been out here. It's about 45 minutes. Yeah. It's fun. Wonderful. I'm not. I'm from Florida. But, I'm his scheduler, so I know this place like the back of my hand. Yeah, unfortunately, go to sleep and dream about maps and schedules. But yeah. Yeah, we're live streaming it. I think it's great. I mean, my husband's the chief of staff for Dennis Ross from Florida, so he's watching it, and I think it's something that really resonates with people all around. I mean, this is horrific, and I actually, when I was in college, went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki for a mission trip, so just seeing the pure devastation that one can have and magnifying that by 130 is just unbelievable.
Good job, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and now, you know how it is when you're in an office and you're just reading documents.
Right. Well, that's
You're the people,
You're absolutely right.
We appreciate it.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. I'm Leslie Fody. It's nice to meet you. Now I know you're a brother. I'm Leslie Fody.
Hi, guys. Okay. That's not true. We can get more into that later, but that is not correct. So, yeah. Okay, you bet. Thank you for your testimony. Was really good. We're happy to be here. Thank you. Yeah. So. But, Okay. We'll be resuming here. Congressman, if we can have you up. Go ahead and gavel us in. Okay. Okay, this begins the public testimony portion of the hearing. Each witness or person who would like to testify has 2 minutes. Where is Penny? Penny will be standing up here.
Down here.
You weren't leaving. And if there's, she'll determine the order. But those of you who would like to speak, please come to the front row, and then Penny will bring you up to testify. And I will be monitoring the time. I will not be rude, but I will tell you when 2 minutes are up.
That doesn't start their 2 minutes.
Correct. Okay, do we have anyone who would like to come up? Please do. Come up, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry. And please state your name and where you're from.
Jim Johnston. I lived in Kingman from 46 to 58. And my dad thought an important part of history would be get us up at pre-dawn to watch those orange glows in the sky. A few minutes later, the windows would rattle and the lights would swing. Then we got to go back to bed for a couple hours before school started. But anyway, back in those days, nobody warned us about eating snow or anything, period, before 58. That must come afterwards. But I'd like to strongly encourage the inclusion of prostate cancer. I don't understand why that's not part of the inclusions. My doctor made me understand that prostate cancer in the male is, the male version of the cancer is breast cancer is to the women. And I, like the pastor over here, was diagnosed at an early age. And that's things the doctors say, oh, you're too young for this. That only happens to men typically in their late 70s and 80s. Not only that, then the biopsy showed I came out with a 7.4 in the Gleason scale, very aggressive form of prostate cancer. And they said something should be done immediately, so I elected to have a complete prostatectomy, which was unusual. He said prostrates are about the size of a walnut, and after surgery he says, well, you're a little bit unusual. Your prostate was the size of an apple. And I says, radiation. But anyway, I do not understand why prostate cancer is not included in the cancers. And of course, some of the after effects, blood clots, it nearly cost me my life. And then the humiliation of impotence, like the pastor mentioned. And I'd just like to encourage the inclusion of prostate cancer.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Hello, my name's John Hiss Briles. I live in Kingman, Arizona now. I've lived in Page, Arizona, Prescott, Arizona. I've lived in Arizona since the early 50s. You heard from my brother, Pastor Dan, a few minutes ago. Now, I just wanted to say a couple things. I graduated from high school in Page, Arizona in 1961. Went into the Army for 3 years. When I got out of the service, my folks had moved to Kingman in 1964, and that's why it's so good to see a lot of the familiar old faces here. You know, Gary Watson and Joe Hart, and I knew all these people, and a lot of people here in town. And it's good to see them again. They're all people that contribute back to society instead of take from society. They're very good families. And I've tried to do the same thing. I remember talking to a friend of mine that I graduated with in Page in 1961. Rick has stayed up there all these years. He's been there. He was the mayor of Page for 4 years. So not just a deadbeat you're talking about, but he was in my senior class. And he told me, he said, John, you know, my wife Kathy just died of breast cancer. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And we'd lost other mutual friends too that we'd gone to school with. Come to find out, and I think my brother gave you a list of some of the things that's happened because of the cancer. I was in a graduating class of 37 people in Page. 20 of those people have passed away from cancer. I was diagnosed, like my brother, with very aggressive prostate cancer in my 50s. And thank goodness for the VA, because I went to the VA hospital in Tucson, had a 3-hour surgery and a couple units of blood. It wasn't much fun, but thank goodness for the VA. They've really helped me. And I just wanted to, I've got another brother, my younger brother, that had surgery for very aggressive prostate cancer in Tucson. And like Dan has told you, we don't have a history of a lot of cancers in our family. We've got pretty good genes, but something happened here. And he was the first robotic prostate surgery. And God bless him, his just didn't turn out quite as good as mine. We don't know how Dan's is yet, but it's gone into his bones, and you know what happens from there. You know, we're going to lose him. But anyway, I thank you, Congressman, for your help and everything you're doing to try to help us out. We need it, and you are our mouthpiece, and we need your help. So thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Greetings. My name is Ruby Johnston Harris, and there sits my dentist.
Hi, Ms. Rudy. How are you? Ruby, how are you doing?
Well, I could be doing better, but I'm doing okay. I resided in Kingman from the age of 7 years old until I was 17, and my family lived on the second floor of an stuccoed adobe structure. My father was intent upon us kids being aware of current events and any history-making events. So it was natural for him to want us to witness firsthand the powerful explosions of the nuclear bombs. We would be awakened pre-dawn to watch the flash on the horizon. And for a short time later, our window panes would shake, as well as the bare light bulb hanging from our kitchen ceiling. Inasmuch as it is considered that milk can be contaminated directly by radiation-exposed cows or indirectly through radiation exposure of feed, I would also like to mention that we as kids consumed approximately a quart of milk apiece daily, delivered to us by the local McCall's Dairy. Actually, we got 4 quarts a day delivered, and one of them usually spilled on the floor, so we didn't get a 4 quart of milk a day. My older sister, Margaret Johnston, was probably the first to be noticeably affected, undergoing numerous breast biopsies for fibroid adenomas until at the age of 30 in 1967. She opted to have a bilateral mastectomy rather than continue the frequent biopsies due to her hypersensitive to anesthetics. Her pathology report diagnosis was fibroid adenomas with hyperplasia of the breast tissue. In 1977, Margaret underwent a pelvic sweep surgery at the consensus of team of doctors in contact with the Anderson Center in Texas. Her pathology diagnosis was mesonephric clear cell carcinoma of the left ovary. My father, John Johnston Sr., also had a breast biopsy and tongue biopsy for benign tumors, but was diagnosed with colon cancer in 1967, requiring a colon resection. I had a benign breast biopsy for fibroid adenoma in 1969 at the age of 29 and underwent a left breast mastectomy in 1991 for infiltrating ductal carcinoma. In 1997, I had a left nephrectomy for renal carcinoma. In 2006, I had a complete hysterectomy for uterine carcinoma, which resulted in complications requiring a 3-month hospitalization, 6 weeks of that time in ICU. My latest cancer incident was right breast carcinoma in 2012, resulting in a right breast mastectomy. I give all glory and praise to a merciful God and intercessory prayers of many that I am alive and able to report these incidences. My younger brother, Jim Johnston, had a prostatectomy in 2008 for cancer of the prostate. And for just a point of reference, he was the first speaker this afternoon. In addition to the multiple incidences of first-generation cancers in my family, I, as a non-smoker, have been diagnosed as having right pulmonary fibrosis, and both of my natural-born children were born with cleft lips and palates. I have resided in Winslow, Navajo County, Arizona from 1969 to the present. It is hard for me to fathom this exclusion of Kingman from the Radiation Exposure Compensation Program. I, among many who have been affected, and on behalf of those who have deceased, request that our portion of Mohave County might fairly be included in the program, and sincerely grateful for your consideration and advocacy on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruby. Thanks for smiling.
Hello, and Representative Gosar, I would like to thank you very much for your efforts, your dedication to this concern and situation. My name is Verna Goldenstein. I was Cookie Ekstrom. I came to Kingman in 1945, went to school here, went to the Wallapai Indian Reservation up in Peach Springs in 1951, I think it was, somewhere along in there, and worked up there. My husband, the father of my children, was in Peach Springs, Valentine, where Keepers of the Wild is now, in 1937. He passed away of cancer almost 2 years ago. I lived, on the reservation up there and in Kingman. I still am a Mohave County resident. My younger brother, who was, I think in about 1951, he was a baby, approximately 7 or 9 months old, and became ill. Dr. Arnold treated him in the hospital in Kingman for leukemia. He is with us still yet today. Thank goodness, and thank Dr. Arnold for his diagnosis of it, because it was not something that was readily diagnosed at that time either. I did see the clouds from the testing sites over there. I have friends of mine who his mother has filed a claim, and the son, she was killed from this, and they have received compensation, rather nice-sized compensation, so I would suggest and recommend that anyone who can or has family or has had family affected by this apply for their compensation under there.
what am I trying to say? Would like to request that you include, and I thank you for this, for doing this and including all of Mohave County. There is no way in thunder that those clouds skipped from Clark County, Nevada County line over Mohave County and went to these other counties and did not cross or have fallout in Mohave County. There's just no physical way. I am 79 years old. I've been very blessed. I have no symptoms of the effects that I very well could have, should have, from having lived here all of these years. Lived in Flagstaff also. So I thank my Maker for that, and I thank you very much for what you have given us.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gosar.
Good afternoon.
My name is Rudy Clark. I am a Mohave County resident. I grew up here in Kingman, Arizona. I attended school up until about 9th grade here in Kingman. In the late 50s, I remember going to the movie theater and hearing of the Atomic Regulatory Commission's short blurb on atomic test sites. I remember in the earlier days, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Delk, Mrs. Bonelli, and Mr. Leonard, who would come to our school and who was a principal and would instruct our teachers to be sure that we learn how to duck and hide and take cover. So we would practice that whenever we had any kind of testing going on. Mr. Gosar, you know that it isn't about just the fallout. It's about the immediate flash of the radiation that is projected as it proceeds out. That flash is not generated by wind, but generated by power of the nuclear blast, which created the plumes to implode and then explode, and then we had the radiation fallout. Just the blast itself can go hundreds of miles for X-rays. There was not a lead sheet given to each and every one of us in this community during the 50s. As a little guy, I used to hang out over here by the K early in the morning to see if I could see that plume. And there's no way that the radiation had not affected us here in Mohave County. So as a Wallapai Tribal Council member, as a member of the Wallapai tribal community, and as a resident of Mohave County, I would wholeheartedly have you support our endeavor to include Mohave County in this piece of legislation. Not only that, but if it wasn't for the Indian Claims Commission and their hearings in the 1960s, Kingman would be a part of the Wallapai Indian Reservation, which encompasses about 5 million acres in northwestern Arizona. The reservation was created in 1883. However,
we had Indians that still remember this town called Haikinwa. This mountain that has an Indian name called Ifliklaka, which means the slingshot spreading here, because that mountain separates the western part of Kingman and the eastern part to Grand Canyon West. Yokosuka is right over here by Dolan Springs. All these mountains here have Indian names, and you're welcome here on the Wallapai lands, ancestral homelands, and I hope that you can come back and join us again. However, we will meet later on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your hat. Don't forget your hat.
Mr. Gosar, I want to thank you very much for putting up with me and all the things you're doing for the county. I will say one thing about Paul Gosar. He really does listen to what you have to say, and I appreciate that. I'm Janelle Stevens. I'm from a cattle ranching family. My family came here in 1882, and then my husband and I had a cattle ranch, and I was raised on a cattle ranch, so we were all out in the open a lot. And my husband got prostate cancer, and so did my brother. And they fought that for a long time. But my mother got breast cancer and passed away. And my grandfather, out of that group, he died of, in '67 from stomach cancer. And then my dad, he had kidney cancer and colon cancer, and he passed away in '89. And my husband's family went through the same type of circumstance. His mother had breast cancer, and it metastasized to her lungs. And she passed away, and so altogether, we've had, between my husband and me, we've had 31 members of our family that passed away from cancer, and most of them were cattle ranching people and outdoors people. You know, that was the main thing we made our living at. And so men, women, and children of those families took part in all of that. And so I'm doing this. I didn't write all this down because, you know, it's just pretty hard. And I know that that Mohave County got more radiation than other counties. When I was 15, my dad and my brother and my uncle and my cousin and I all rode up to the Aquarius out here to see the plumes. You know, it was a big thing in the news and all. And we were sitting there, and I have a specific date for that. That was in 1953. And we were sitting there talking, and here comes this dust just swishing over us. And my dad says, we better get off this hill because that stuff's dangerous. And so we did, but it was too late. It just came too fast, and it just covered us and our horses. And out of that group of people, that was my uncle. He wound up with Parkinson's disease, passed away from that. My brother got prostate cancer. Daddy died. And so out of that 5 people, 3 passed away from cancer. And so that goes on, and I worked with a wonderful group of people this year. The committee was just absolutely unbelievable. And so there is one thing here I want to reiterate. That's
the blast hood. It says, balloon shot, largest atmospheric test in the continental United States, 74 kiloton. Now, that's atmospheric. A balloon, what's it do? Pops, the wind takes it. And so I feel that through the years that at least 1,000 of those shots came right through Kingman. And you know, yourself, you know that that is what happened. And I have a lot of information here to give your panel. I hope some of it will help. My classmates have passed away just one after another, and you know, and in our, I went to school in Kingman, grade school, junior high, and high school, and so we had a very small class of 65. And in that 65, a lot of us are still friends today. We just, there's just a bond that I can't explain, but a lot of them have been here today, and we're very close class, and we still are really good friends, and so we see each other just passing away one after another, and their families. Everybody in the committee have families affected by cancer with more than one, fathers, sisters, mothers, and so we know, we do work hard, as you know, to try to get this thing pushed forward, and I hope that it gets, you know, justice. I hope it gets recognized and justice for everyone. And you know, you talk about.
Ma'am, if you could wrap up and conclude, thank you.
Is that it?
You're a little bit over time.
Okay, I'm out of time, so I can't say anything else, but.
Thank you, Danielle. And remember, all the comments that you're submitting will be put in as submitted for the record.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Danielle. Appreciate it.
I've got this book for you guys, too.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Auld. Thank you for everything you guys are doing for this cause. I was born here in 1960. My family, part of them came in 1945, I think, and the other rest in 1948. All of both sides of my family were here from 1948. All four of my grandparents and my father all died of various forms of cancer, all of which were included in the list that you had there. At least 3 people that I can remember in my graduating class from high school have died of leukemia and I'm 54 years old, so that's relatively young for leukemia. My parents talked about other people who they had known, I remember them talking about family friends that died at an early age. I kind of vaguely knew of the Downwinders program. I became directly aware of it kind of in a weird way, it seems to me. My dad died early, and my mother married a gentleman who lived in Yavapai County and was in the area that was covered by the original Downwinders program. The government sent me a letter here in Kingman out of the blue. I didn't know anything about it, that said I was eligible for a part of his money because my mother had been married to him when I was a youth, when I was a child. Anyway, I haven't gotten any money, but I filled out the forms and sent them in, and it's been over a year, and they came to me, so you would theoretically think that they were farther along with the claim than people who just first initially sent it in. But I haven't heard anything back. I suppose I should call. But anyway, that's how I became involved in it. And I, with all due respect, it just seems, with all the stuff that's going on in the government and all the things you hear all the time, you'd think that after all of this that we've talked about, everybody knows that this is the right thing to do. And it just seems to me like somebody just ought to do something, and I appreciate the fact that that's what we're doing here and that you're here doing something. But it seems like a no-brainer. Somebody said that in the audience earlier. It's a no-brainer. I mean, nobody said anything contrary. There's no argument about it. Why can't we just do it? The government just goes too slow. That's all.
Thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oops. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the privilege to stand here before you, Gosar. My name is Jean Bajola. I am a member of the Wallapai Tribal Council and also a member of the Wallapai Tribe. I was born here in Kingman and kind of raised here and there. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of give you some information that I did get from our tribal health department. And right now, currently, we have 7 that are still living that have cancer. And within the past 5 years, 7 have passed away. And within the past 5 to 10 years, there were 7 that had passed away. And also, there were quite a few of them that were diagnosed with cancer. And some of those, I don't know, where the status is of those that were diagnosed. But myself, back in 1979, I was, I had to have surgery because I was precancerous also. So I do believe that, I don't know what the government was thinking at that time when they did this testing, thinking that when they did this, that it wasn't going to harm anyone or anything, I don't know why they would even allow that. And to me, that's just totally wrong, destroying lives just, to do some kind of testing. So, as a tribal council member, I really do strongly urge that this thing be pushed through to justify, for all the wrong that the government has done. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Congressman Gosar, very nice to have you in Kingman. Thank you for coming. And I just have a couple points I want to make real quick. I wanted to thank you for including Clark County in your attempt this time. I was born in Clark County in 1951, and my mother tells me that as an infant, and my younger siblings and I would be on the front porch watching the plumes of the nuclear testing. And then shortly after I was born, as still an infant, we moved to Mohave County, where I attended schools, and I've lived and worked my entire life. So late in 2013, I was diagnosed with cancer and went through the surgery and the radiation treatments and everything. And I'm now a cancer survivor, except for the financial aspect of it. And I just wanted to let you know that $50,000 in today's economy is just not enough to compensate these downwinders. The first bill I got was just for the surgery, and that was $46,000. And every time I go to the mailbox now, there's another bill. So, if you could get the compensation raised a little bit, that'd be great. And I appreciate what you're doing for us.
Gene, thank you. Good seeing you again.
Paul, I know we're running out of time. Last time I was here, McCain was here. They cut it short on us. I didn't get to talk. I want to make sure I talk today. Thank you for being here, you guys. Appreciate it. I'm going to speak for Eleanor Logus. I had long conversations with her about what went on with this. I don't know if the name rings a bell. She's definitely in your records of trying to put this through before. Like Ms. Stevens said, this has gone on and on. I've known it's gone on and on. We're tired of it. It's not your fault. Don't take it personal. Once again, thanks for being here. Now, I can tell you a story to erase your question mark you showed on your PowerPoint. Buster Johnson's question about Havasu. I have friends and family now that are in Reno, Nevada, and up in the White Mountains, up by Sholo. Both of those families, their uncle and their father were over the Wallapais like the next day or a few hours after the blast, and at least 3 different times the Geiger counter in their plane, one guy was a miner, pegged out. So don't ever try and convince me or anybody in the government that this didn't happen.
This was back over here between Yucca and Alamo Road and the Wallapies, also over Red Lake. You just heard from all the ranchers, all the outdoor people, you know what's going on. If you need help, all I can say to you, maybe this Bundy Ranch standoff will help you. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Congressman Gosar, I appreciate you hearing me. In 1966, I married into the George Prentice Lois Moser family. My husband and his sister both died early from small cell adenoma cancer and bone cancer. During the times that I was married and visiting with the family, George, my father-in-law, said that they did pass out dosimeter badges, and the government came and collected all of the badges. And I said, well, you know, how much radiation did you get? And he says, oh, probably none. They would have told us. My husband also said when he was a child, his school teacher would take him out to the schoolyard so they could witness the mushroom and the flash. Dickie Grounds died, and Dr. Standifer, my doctor, while I was living here in Kingman, said that the leukemia for these little children was just off the scale. And Dickie Grounds was one of the many who died, and they named a football field after him. I remember that. So there are many in my husband's class who have died, few who are still alive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate it.
We have time for two more.
Thank you very much for your time. I'm Carol Wastel. My parents remodeled a small business in Flagstaff in the early 50s along with my uncle. My father died of cancer in '60. That was pancreatic. My uncle died of brain cancer. My mother had colon cancer and breast cancer. And I have worked with Laura. She was very good. But I didn't find this out until in about 2005, reading an article in a paper from the Arizona Republic. And I'm a nurse up on the Wallapai Reservation. And I've worked with the Wallapai since '89. I have seen a lot of cancer. One day after I saw this stuff and I started thinking about my own family, another nurse and I were looking this over, and we saw 7 or 8 people in this small community with kidney cancer and kidney surgery and other kinds of cancers. And so I said, why in the world isn't Mohave County? And so I've been with the Downwinders off and on. I've not been a real active member. I just come when I can. But I would really urge you to get Mohave County, I call it, on the map. There just doesn't make any sense that this is going on and Mohave County was left out. And thank you for coming yourself. This is very impressive that you're here yourself, giving your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you.
This will be our last testimony today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Hassel. I was born in Kingman, and I didn't write anything down because I wasn't going to come up, but I talked to you, and I appreciate you asking me to come up. So, like I said, I was born in Kingman, and we moved from Kingman to Boulder City, Nevada, and we also watched the big mushrooms and everything. All of the family did, and we played in the dirt that we didn't know was contaminated. And the government asked everybody, you know, I guess it was in the newspaper, I'm not sure how the word got around, but the government brought mannequins, tables and dishes and cars and everything
that was on the ground when the blast went off, and they said it's completely safe. We want you to come see that it didn't even break the dishes. It was completely safe. And that was on Fremont Street, and probably in around 1953. I'm not positive. I was probably 7 or 8. And we all went there and walked around the dishes and the mannequins, and the government says it's not going to hurt you whatsoever. And in the summertime, we would go back to Kingman and Wickiup and drink the milk, you know, from the fresh cows, and enjoyed life, and everything was good because, well, we thought the government's protecting us, and they were not. So I've lost my mom, my father, my brother, and my sister, so to cancer. So I thank you very much. And I'm the vice president of the Mohave County Daughters of the Pioneers. So thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and close the hearing and thank everyone.
Well, before I give my closing statement, what I would really like is to give a Mohave congratulations to Dr. Shizmandera for coming out here. We certainly appreciate the expertise. You understand now the passion which these people look at and see. So thank you for coming all the way out to Mohave County. We certainly appreciate it. I would like to thank all the witnesses for taking time out of their busy schedules and appearing today. You have all provided great insights, which are critical to making necessary reforms to the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or known as RECA. All the testimonies, statements, and information shared today will be submitted to the congressional record. These materials will prove invaluable as we seek to amend RECA and honor the promise Congress made to so many of our friends and families. I ask for unanimous consent that other members, witnesses, and other citizens have 5 legislative days to submit additional statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.